Hello, and welcome to the Kongversation. I'm Hyle Russell.
And I'm Cameron Reigle.
And we have really gotten over the hump of it, Cameron, when talking about Star Fox Adventures. In the first two installments of our Spotlight series, we discussed the drama around the build to the game's release. And on the second episode, we went in-depth with the characters, story, and lore of the game, which was the real taxing part. That was tricky, I guess I'll say, because there's just so much of it. So much of it is obtuse, and what order you tackle it in. I think we did a pretty okay job with the last installment. So this episode, it's kind of going to be the cool down. It's going to not necessarily take us through any grand chronological narrative of Star Fox Adventures, either from an out-of-universe developmental perspective, a release perspective, or an in-game perspective. This is more of us talking about just feelings. How much we both enjoy the game, how much it means to the fandom of the Donkey Kong universe and Rare and DK Vine itself. And we're going to be talking about some of our favorite highlights, some of our favorite tracks in the game from David Wise, and we're going to talk about the voice acting a little bit more because I feel like that is just something you have to do in any Star Fox game, sans, Star Fox for the Super Nintendo or the little LCD watch thing you could get from the cereal. Did you know about that one, Cameron?
No.
Yeah, after Star Fox for the Super Nintendo, I forget which cereal brand it was.
No, I do remember this. Okay. Yeah, I've seen it, but I don't have the context of where it came from.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a little, almost, it's a watch game, but it's like the little Tiger Electronics, just so rinky-dink, but it's so ubiquitous in the early 90s, all of those LCD games. I know there's a Battletoads Tiger game, but this was even smaller than that. And
it was always weird if one of those little LCD games was your first exposure to an actual, video game release. I think I had a friend who had a Sonic 3D Blast one of those, and it was like, I picked it up I guess this isn't actually what this game is going to be like.
Yeah, I never owned the Tiger Electronics stuff because I guess I always just saw through it. But I think every one of my friends had at least one. So I played them quite a bit whenever I was over at their house. And I just, I'll pick this up and give it a whirl. It's like, I hate this. Because I was so used to that Nintendo polish that anything that tried to pass itself off as a video game that was less than a Game Boy, I just couldn't abide. And I'm somebody who can appreciate a real scaled down thing. But anyway, my point being, I consider that a real Star Fox game too. But yeah, I just want this episode to kind of be chill. We don't really have anything grand to accomplish. We're just going to really nerd out a little bit about Star Fox Adventures and what it means to us in particular. So, welcome to this episode of The Kongversation. I want to highlight some bits of the game, though, like some of our favorite segments from the game. And I don't really have any master plan for this. I think just the things that most stick out in our minds 20 years later. Just I really remember this. I really like that one. So I'll start. the prologue with Krystal, the entirety of it, from flying on the Cloud Runner, fighting General Scales' galleon, to boarding General Scales' galleon, to the whole sequence in Krazoa Palace. I really like and appreciate, especially after seeing the Dinosaur Planet leak from last year, how it really is kind of starting in media res with Dinosaur Planet. If you're buying this because it's a Star Fox game, it really makes you wait for any context about how this ties into Star Fox. It starts with Krystal, it starts with the Krazoa and General Scales and various dinosaurs, and Team Star Fox and the Lilat system don't really come into play until after Krystal is entrapped by Andross.
I remember actually showing this game to the person who introduced me to Star Fox 64 and thinking like, yeah, they'll like this. It's like a much prettier looking Star Fox game, and they got to this prologue, just immediately tuned out.
Really? Yeah,
Just
I mean,
because like this isn't what I came for, kind of thing. But I really like this prologue a lot, and it's funny. Like on paper, the idea of converting an entirely unrelated IP into a Star Fox game sounds kind of ridiculous. Like, how are you going to marry that? And then you find out that no, this game always began with like an aerial combat shooter segment.
yeah, it doesn't seem like such an anachronism now, and it's part of Star Fox Adventures. I imagine it would have felt a little weird just being immediately launching into that. And it's funny how, like, the various Star Fox wikis, I think there's two. I think it's like Lilat Wiki and R-Wing Wiki or something. But they consider the Galleon shootout to be a boss fight. I'm like, oh wow, the game starts with a boss fight, according to some experts here. But I don't know, I really like that you're just kind of dropped cold into this narrative, into this world, just like you would have been had it been Dinosaur Planet. And there's nothing really to anchor that in pre-existing Star Fox lore yet. Except, you do see Andross, you see from Andross's point of view, they do this really cool ghost vision effect. It's like greenish and blurred, and
I don't know what like this is meant to imply about like the way Andross sees the world, but it's a really cool visual filter they do.
yeah, and you don't really know going into this, not having the game spoiled or not having played it through once. You don't know that this is Andross or even a ghost that's watching you. And I really like that once you put the pieces together, because they use this effect a couple of times in the game. I know, like, when Fox goes down to Cape Claw for the first time, you see somebody watching him from the bushes, and it's the same effect, and Fox is like, he gets that chill, and he's like, is somebody there? And, not putting it together until the very end when you realize this has been Andross's ghost watching the events, manipulating the events from the start, so he can bodily reincarnate himself using the power of the Krazoa. It's just a cool little touch. We talked last time about how it's basically Rise of Skywalker. What Rise of Skywalker should have been the story of Palpatine's resurrection, rather than just jumping to the fireworks factory and giving us resurrected Palpatine from the start. But
I'll also say, like, and this is kind of a commentary on the game as a whole.
mm-hmm.
I like the color. Whenever I think of this moment in the game, I think like overwhelmingly of the color palettes.
Yeah.
It's like this bit on the galleon is very blue, but you have like Scales show up and he's like a neon green and like stark orange and standing in the rain. He's got glowing eyes. I think something Star Fox Adventures does really well that I think has helped it visually age a lot better than games of its time that I would say like are only like degrees removed from the style it's trying to go for, which is like, semi-realistic.
Mm-hmm.
It has a very good sense of like color direction. Nothing ever feels like drab to me in it. And I don't know if that's inherited from it being an N64 game where like rare tended to rely very heavily on vertex shading.
Yeah.
Which was like coloring the underlying polygons under a texture to give it more color depth.
Right.
But everything just has such good color toning to it in this game. It's always very vibrant and very distinct, and I really appreciate that about it.
That's a good point, because I, being a child of the 90s, of the N64 era, I always liked the Reigle and N64 games that weren't Nintendo or Rare, because they were always drenched in fog to hide the draw distance. And I think the visual hiccup of the GameCube was that everything now, when you go back to it, looks so washed out. Not everything, obviously. There's still very vibrant games on the GameCube, but so many games just seem like the color palette is just muted, or like the contrast is out of whack. It's dialed way down. I don't know why, but it just gets that feeling. But yeah, you're right. The color, the vibrancy of everything in this game just pops. It's resplendent. And here, like, on the Galleon, by the way, can I just point out that I love that Rare found a way to work in a Galleon in Dinosaur Planet / Star Fox Adventures. Like, yeah, can't really work pirates into this. But what if we give General Scales a flying galleon? All right, good. Let's do it.
Yeah, Jeff has expressed several times, like, desire for that weirdly, like, animate figurehead to show up in Sea of Thieves.
Yeah.
And, like, I see why. I also like we talked a little bit last episode about kind of appreciating sometimes that Star Fox Adventures doesn't explain things to you.
Right.
I like that we never, like, figure out what's up with that, like, living figurehead, which is also, like, I feel like it's, like, also, like, deliberately animated a little bit stiffer than everything else. It's got like a Ray Harryhausen stop motion kind of quality to it.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what it is to this day. I think we've hedged our bets, and I think, like, DK Vine has in the past considered it a character. I don't know if I would go that far. Speaking from my vantage point, it might just be like this animatronic thing or a bit of magic or whatever, because it just raises so many questions. But yeah, I do like that they don't explain it. You are thrown into this wild world, and especially the prologue is just drenched in mysticism and vague spirituality, and it's got this unsettling feeling as you wander the halls of Krazoa Palace. Despite the fact that it's been attacked, essentially, you just have this feeling of dread.
It is a bit like survival horror-y when you get into Krazoa Palace, because you're coming there, something has happened, you're not entirely given an explanation as to what.
Mm-hmm.
Just that, like, Scale showed up, tore the place apart, and hurt or killed everybody there.
Yeah, and it really ties in well with, of course, we know Andross is utilizing the power of the Krazoa to basically pull a long con on what turns out to be Fox. I don't know if he was anticipating Fox and Team Star Fox to arrive and assist the situation, but he was basically used Krystal as bait for whoever wanted to play the hero, I guess, to bring the power of the Krazoa.
There's a kind of, like, nice little, I remember, like, one of the Earthwalkers you can talk to just says, like, Scales has unleashed a great evil here.
Yeah.
Which, without the context, you think, oh, that's just, like, a very flowery way of saying, like, he did something really horrible here. But no, they mean he brought Andross's ghost with him.
Yeah. I would love to see the prequel story about how Andross's ghost seduced General Scales. I seduced in the sense of doing evil, not like, the Patrick Swayze Demi Moore movie.
No, like, as we find out later in the story, like, Scales didn't even realize he was being manipulated the entire time.
Yeah, but I don't know. I think it's better left to the imagination, because there's no way to really satisfactorily pay that off.
No, I there's no way to also, like, for drama purposes, show, like, Scales walking around and Andross is a ghostly, like, devil on his shoulder. Right. You can't really portray that with any kind of gravitas.
But yeah, and you can also infer, because, we talked about the whole thing about Krystal's home planet of was Serenia. I always forget the name of it if I don't have it right in front of me. Um, but the whole story of her home planet being destroyed, and you can maybe piece.
We don't even see that planet and got a name before Dinosaur Planet. It's named, but Dinosaur Planet in the title is not.
But yeah, you can infer like, oh, so did the Krazoa also settle on her planet? And that's why it was destroyed, is Andross was doing a test run of what he would need to do with using the power of the Krazoa to resurrect himself. And that's what brought Krystal to the Lilat system and to Saria. And, but I like that you can piece it all together from this prologue. After the fact, once the twist ending is revealed to you, you can then go back to the very beginning and be like, oh, okay, okay. So that's really why Star Fox Adventures is one of my favorite narratives that Rare has sort of unspooled for us. It's because you have to do so much of the work yourself.
I guess also another thing in this prologue that applies to the whole game really is, like, the same is also true of Bad Fur Day, but I appreciate it more and more. Like, there is so much bespoke character animation in this game at a time when games didn't always do that. Like, just in this intro alone, you get, like, Scales threatening walk up, like him laughing at himself, like Krystal, like, pointing at him, like physically picking her up by the neck and like dragging her across the floor to hold her over the edge.
Right.
Like you were lucky in this era if like you got like lip flaps and a character doing something other than like just standing there kind of miming their hands at you.
I remember Donkey Konga and Donkey Konga 2 portrayed their stories through Polaroids on a corkboard. So, which just makes it look like the ramblings of a conspiratorial-minded, paranoid survivalist. It's funny then to compare it to just how richly animated everything is in this game, and
like I know we talked about it a little bit last episode with like Fox's eye rolls and everything, but I feel like this game hits on something really smart, which I guess was kind of baked in with Dinosaur Planet, but also really lends itself well to Star Fox. It's a game that's very aware that Star Fox characters have giant eyes, and it like uses them super expressively. Yeah, and I feel like I remember back in the day, like people having a bit of a joke with that, like because Fox makes a lot of like silly meme faces you can screen cap out of context, but it really does like make every character like really expressive and fun.
We need more GIFs. We need more GIFs, if you prefer. We need more of those from Star Fox Adventures. I think just by nature of when the game came out and how it's harder to capture quality videos of this game unless you're using an emulator. We don't have them, but there would be so many you could use from this. So. But yeah, it's like Conker's Bad Fur Day also had a lot of the very animated, reactions from Conker, and Star Fox Adventures really like took it over the finish line for Rare on Nintendo consoles as it's just like a year and a half later. So, one other thing I'll say about the prologue before we move on is I do really appreciate that Krystal got a little moment in the sun, even though it was completely night in the rain-soaked Krazoa Palace. Because, she was given sort of a raw deal in comparison to what her role was going to be in Dinosaur Planet, but she made out a whole lot better than Barry did in Conker. Because, Barry's role was excised completely outside of story elements in Bad Fur Day, and of course, she then met a very grisly end, whereas Krystal came out of this, joined Team Star Fox, and continued to appear in games, as most recently as 2019 Super Smash Bros. Ultimate as an assist trophy. So I would say that this really helped to make Krystal, even though she was barely in the game after the prologue, the fact that she was at the beginning of the game, she really stuck with people. And it actually did her more good than just saying, let's just get rid of it completely, and then where would she be?
Yeah, I wish that she got more, but at the very least, the prologue like gives me the feeling like the way that they handled it gives me the feeling like, oh, this character could do more.
Yeah. The potential is still there for sure, and I think that Star Fox Assault definitely, it definitely kept that flame alive, whether or not it utilized Krystal to the best of its abilities. Well, it had to juggle the entire team, and at least she was there, as like 1/6 of the elements when you factor in Peppy and R.O.B. But yeah, I just like her around. I like her being proactive, and it was really fun to, get to play as her, even though she plays the same as Fox, for the most part, except she doesn't have her staff here, right? She lost
Also,
it.
just like bluntly, it's good to have a prominent girl on the Star Fox team.
Yeah, even if both Nintendo and Rare were horny on main when making some decisions regarding her. But yeah, it is what it is. It was 2002. She got away from sort of the warrior Princess Leia in the gold bikini archetype pretty quickly. Star Fox Assault, I think mostly did away with that, considering she was a pilot in that game. So, all right. Well, the other sequence from relatively early in the game that I fondly recall, and it's another one that was basically ported over from Dinosaur Planet, was...
It's striking how like identical this is with its Dinosaur Planet incarnation for similar reasons to the prologue.
Yeah, and it was really, surprising when seeing the ROM last year. I was just like, oh my god, this feels so familiar. It's basically just shot for shot identical, except with character switched around and it being on the N64. But yeah, Ice Mountain. When Fox comes to Dinosaur Planet, he gets the staff in Thorntail Hollow, meets the Queen Earthwalker, sets out to find Tricky, goes to the Warp Stone. The Warp Stone teleports him to Ice Mountain, one of the only two locations the Warp Stone can take Fox on Dinosaur Planet. That and Krazoa Palace. Which, why Ice Mountain? Well, I guess it's just hard to trek up there, so...
Ice Mountain on the Dinosaur Planet.
Very blunt. But, basically it's a speeder bike chase. It's Fox chases after the Sharp Claw, and it's just a fun little sequence of racing downhill, sort of like a ski run, but on futuristic jet bikes.
Yeah, and again, the futuristic hover bikes, always in it since it was Dinosaur Planet. I could, if I knew nothing else, I could swear that was a Star Fox original.
Yeah.
Because, it's already kind of thematically weird after we just had the magic galleon, but it's been in there. There's actually two little things that I think are enhanced by the switch over to this being a Star Fox game about this sequence.
Yeah.
That I really appreciate. One of them is when Fox goes to rescue Tricky, and Saber in the original, he runs into the Sharp Claws, and they kind of ask him, like, who are you? And depending on the game, he says, like, I am... I'm Fox McCloud, leader of the Star Fox team. I've come to take the prince back home. In both games, the Sharp Claws don't give a shit and just immediately ignore him to go run after Tricky.
Right.
In the final game, they even one of them smacks Fox in the face with his club on the way out. But I like this. I like this more with the framing of it being a Star Fox game because. Yeah, Fox is the big deal galactic hero, and these Sharp Claws don't give the slightest shit.
Well, also, it makes sense given how insular Dinosaur Planet is. I think they missed the bulk of the whole Andross insurgency, so... Yeah, good for Fox for saving the solar system, but it didn't really matter to the denizens of Dinosaur Planet. So, yeah, who are you? I don't care, Yeah,
The other moment is when Fox first meets Tricky at the frozen lake. the translator is still like being worked, like still has a few kinks. It's not like 100% working.
Yeah.
So his first meeting is kind of delayed with like Tricky standing there making fun of him, but Fox can't understand it.
Right.
And is like steadily getting more and more frustrated and pissed off that he can't follow what's happening.
Yeah.
So he's even angrier at Tricky making fun of him.
And it's a good way to set up the sort of, not antagonistic, but the way Fox just bristles against any of the assumed responsibility he now has for Tricky. It's basically like one of those, like, fish out of water, like, dad comedy movies where it's like, I'm not a parent, I'm a workaholic, or I'm a fun party dude, and now I'm saddled with this child. I won't ever love this child. And then, of course, by the end of the movie, you know, they're inseparable, which is what happens with Fox and Tricky, but it's a very rare take on it. And it's also fun to have that rare take and then apply it to a major Nintendo character like Fox McCloud.
It's also fun, like, intro to Tricky, where you get, like, we already know Fox is like bitter and jaded and kind of done with it already. But it's also a good primer on Tricky because we kind of get this, like, you know, he's a bratty little child, royalty,
yeah,
even, and he's kind of been tossed into this situation that you get the feeling like this is his first time really dealing with something this serious.
For sure, yeah.
And they're both kind of like uniting over this like bad circumstance that they both found themselves in, and kind of like warming up to each other based on that.
Yeah, and that's what I think a lot of people forget is Tricky also doesn't really think much of Fox at the beginning. He's a little bit more enthusiastic at gung-ho, especially because, you know, he gets into the spirit of things much more quickly, being an adaptable child and not a mid-20-something who's fallen into hard times. But
and he's also a kid, so, you know, once Fox like can throw out like, hey, I'm the leader of Star Fox and I'm a pilot, and like, yeah, that'll instantly get a kid on your side. Like, you fly a plane, cool.
I do think this is one area where the switch to Star Fox Adventures actually benefited the story, is having Fox McCloud as the sort of counterpart, unwanted guardian of Tricky. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it would have worked with Saber too, but having it be Fox McCloud, this clear outsider who we know is this big hotshot, you know, Top Gun sci-fi action hero, and then all of a sudden you're gonna basically make him a surrogate parent for the duration of the game. It's fun. It's fun in a very unusual way, because when else would Fox McCloud be put into this situation other than Star Fox Adventures?
It's even, like, good for Fox's character, too, because you have the dynamic of, like, oh, Tricky is worried about his parents. Well, Fox's dad died at the hands of Andross.
And then
like, he knows what it's like to have your like, father figure put in danger because of some, like, mad tyrant.
Absolutely. There's that undercurrent to it. And then you've got Fox. He gradually starts caring about Tricky, even if he won't probably admit it to himself towards near the end. But Tricky is basically his conduit to caring about the entirety of Dinosaur Planet. Caring about it in terms of more than just, this is my mission, I'm getting paid for this. This is Fox learning to love Soria via his budding love for Tricky. It's a really sweet, wholesome story, and coming a year and a half out of Conker's Bad Fur Day, I understand why a lot of people, especially people my age at the time, but I'm sure people younger than me, kids even, would have sort of not gotten into this, because there is this kind of earnestness to this, and really the entirety of Star Fox Adventures, that's lacking the cold cynicism of Conker, or really much of the video game industry where it was trending at this point. It is something that I find I love way more the older I get, and the more... So I'm kind of multifaceted, Cameron. The older I get, the more, I don't want to say perverted. That's putting too harsh of a tone on it. The more depraved I get, but also the more wholesome I get as well. So I'm much more touchy-feely than I used to be. I'm much more in tune with who I am. And this is always who I've been. I've been a very empathetic person my entire life, even when it wasn't really cool or considered an attractive quality to be an empathetic person. And that's why Star Fox Adventures really resonated with me, is it fed that part of my soul that wasn't getting fed through any other media of really that era or much of what would come out later that decade. There is just something true blue about Star Fox Adventures, and especially that Fox and Tricky relationship. And I think I was open to the Fox and Tricky relationship because of Tricky, the whole reason DK Vine continued to cover Star Fox Adventures was they maintained Tricky, who, through our understanding and later soft confirmation from Rare, is the same character from Diddy Kong Racing. This is essentially a Diddy Kong Racing spin-off that got merged into a Star Fox 64 sequel, and so I was more primed to care about Tricky, and because of that, it opened up my heart, just like Fox McCloud's heart opened up. And I love everything about Fox and Tricky, and I will defend the character of Tricky. I will defend this narrative. I will defend the choices they made until the very end, because I think you have to have your heart closed off to not be charmed by this just a little bit.
Yeah, it's a very heartwarming story with a very cynical and bristly character, which I think is my favorite combination you can do tonally.
Yeah. It's also just a nice tonic. I love Conker. Don't get me wrong. When I'm comparing this to Conker's Bad Fur Day, it's not to throw Conker under the same bus that ran over Whizpig. That's an in-joke for those of you who don't know. Whizpig wasn't actually run over by a bus, nor should he be. Whizpig never did anything wrong except being an evil.
You need a very big tyrant. Bus too.
Yeah. But I like Conker, but I think the older that I get, the more I gravitate towards something like Star Fox Adventures, which is just pure. I don't know. There's a purity to it. Outside of the porno saxophone solos and the implied heavy-duty fucking that goes on at the end of the game, this is a very sweet narrative at its heart. And I don't know. Just everything about Fox and Tricky from this beginning in Snowhorn Waste. And you get his ball, you can buy his ball, and then you can play ball with him anytime you want, which is how I played a lot of this game. Honestly, a lot of the hours I sunk into it was just from spending time with Tricky and making him happy. I don't know. It brings a tear to my eye.
It's good. There's a lot of like I said last time, there's a lot of little good moments with Tricky where he's just he can be like a little puppy, a dog, a child, sometimes a cat, kind of. They do a lot of fun little things to just make him very adorable in this game.
That's a good point too, because even if you don't have a child or you have no care or desire to ever have kids, you can still see a lot of your pets in Tricky, like a dog or a cat. Oh yeah, Tricky is basically a talking pet in some respects, which is...
what does Fox say when you pull out the ball? He says, "Go get it!"
Yeah, right. Which, I don't know, I don't know what pets look like in the Lilat system, considering they have every shape of anthropomorphic bipedal animal, walking upright and talking to you. So, who knows? But Fox definitely has that vibe with Tricky, where he's like, "You're my dog. You're my talking dog, and I'm falling in love with you, boy." And I don't know. It's sweet. There's something for everybody in Tricky, I maintain. And if you have a problem with Tricky, I've seen plenty of modern day cynicism towards Tricky. People playing Star Fox Adventures and just refusing to embrace it. And I think they really need to just stop caring about what other people think and really get in touch with their touchy-feely sides. Because I think the story between the two of them is the emotional core of Star Fox Adventures, and it's why it was so nice to have Tricky come back in Star Fox Assault, aged up a little bit, and to have that reunion with Fox where he like pounces on him. He's now like almost a fully grown Earthwalker, but he jumps on Fox like your dog would jump on you after you've been away for a long time. And I love it. I still hold this up as probably I don't know if I would say it's my second favorite DKU relationship outside of Donkey and Diddy, maybe Diddy and Dixie, but I would even put it above Banjo and Kazooie, in my opinion. There's just something so real about their friendship develops, because we're seeing it develop as the game progresses. Like Banjo Kazooie, they already know each other somehow at the beginning of Banjo Kazooie. Everything about the relationship happened off screen. Donkey and Diddy, we sort of see them bond through, the implied narrative in Donkey Kong Country. So I think because of that, I have such a strong emotional attachment to it. And it's the same reason why Fox and Tricky just work so well for me.
Yeah. And, on the flip side, while we're complimenting like gameplay mechanics, I do like that they threw in the little bit where if you're mean to Tricky and you like hit him and are violent, that he will light you on fire.
Right. I could never do this. I might accidentally hit him once or twice if he gets in the way while I'm staffing Sharp Claw or whatever. But, I was always the best to Tricky during my playthrough of Star Fox Adventures. Do we want to talk about any of the bosses, Cameron? Because there are, I would say, 4 prominent boss fights in the game and general scales.
Yeah, and I think they are kind of like, as far as like big gameplay hallmarks, they are kind of like centerpieces of the areas you find them in. So I think it makes sense to like talk about the bosses a little bit, but also like the context around them a little.
Yeah. So it's funny because in the title, I guess just the titles that pop up for the boss fights, it's always prefaced by boss. So Boss Galdon. And because of that, I always associate the name of the character as Boss Galdon, even though I think it's just Galdon.
Yeah, it's not like Boss Nass. It's right. Just a.
Well, it's even in our Avatar gallery on the DK Vine forum, going all the way back to when Avatars, I think it was 2004, we established those. But yeah, we have like Boss Galdon, Boss Red Eye, Boss Dracor, and just like, wow, that's a real artifact of that time.
Do you think that's like general scales where they don't translate boss in Saurian?
Yeah, it might be. I don't know. Like I don't know if we ever see it spelled out in Saurian. It's been a while since I've actually played the game, mind you, but
I doubt we ever do.
Yeah.
just a thought.
Whenever I need to get screen caps of Star Fox Adventures, I usually just pull up an emulator, and I only have I've only progressed so far on that, and but yeah, I would love to actually replay Star Fox Adventures. Just talking about it the last couple of weeks, I'm jonesing for it really bad. Jones sodaing it for it. I need some
Fox fueling for it.
Yeah, I need that apple soda in my veins, the green apple. But Boss Galdon is the boss in Dark Ice Mines, I believe.
This is an interesting boss because it's one that was like heavy in the marketing even when it was Dinosaur Planet.
Yeah, I think just first boss. Wasn't it even a showcase at some of the trade shows?
I think they demoed it at E3, or at the very least like showed footage of it.
Boss Galdon is weird because he's not anything.
Right out of the gate, a totally made-up creature, not a dinosaur.
Not a dinosaur. It's an insectoid of some sort, right?
I guess like a dinosaur, but like a made-up one. He's got like an insect, like it is like a dinosaur insect centaur. Kind of. It's weird. He's got like a hood frill around his neck that's like spiked. It's like a very interesting like sort of like mashup chimera monster design.
I think the implication is that it's some sort of prehistoric beast, prehistoric for Soria, a land brimming with what we consider prehistoric creatures, but
which would jive with the context of how you find Galdon.
Yeah, because Galdon is frozen within the eponymous Dark Ice Mines, and you basically thaw him using Tricky, and because Tricky can breathe fire, something he didn't do in Diddy Kong Racing, but he was being a good sport there, aside from the cheating. But I think it was in deleted audio or text that people found that Garunda Tay says he froze Galdon as like a precautionary measure. Like, this is this beast that the Snowhorns had to contend with, and he had him frozen, put him on deep freeze, which I don't know how you do that when you are in Dark Ice Mines. There's
a lot of technological questions I have about Dinosaur Planet, given that it's a planet where like only one species has thumbs. I don't know, or not even thumbs. Like, I mean, there are upright dinosaurs like the bonehead that we talked about.
Yeah,
but just there's a lot of like, even just like, how does anybody get in and out of the shopkeeper's shop?
Yeah,
on Dinosaur Planet.
Considered it's in Thorntail Hollow of all places. How did it? I've always imagined like Thorntails trying to get down in there and just having a hell of a time, and then once they get down in there, they can't get back out.
Shabunga, you're not ADA compliant. You gotta like put a ramp in there.
I just picture Shabunga with like rope and pulley, and
This is why he keeps like muttering about moving to Cape Claw. It's not it's not the beach that he wants. It just needs to not be in a hole.
But yeah, Galdon is basically an on-foot fight, and it's I think it's the most traditional boss fight in the game, in that you have to. It feels very much like a Zelda fight.
It's extremely Zelda-y, and also kind of like it's. I like that the like way the fight resolves is very like Looney Tunes-y.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
where you kind of like. You puzzle out like, well, you're not attacking him directly. You have to distract him with Tricky by getting him to stand there so you can swing around and hit him in the back.
Mm-hmm.
And then he'll try to eat you, and you have to like wallop his uvula over and over again so he'll spit you back up.
Right. It's somehow the least memorable boss fight in the game for me, despite it being first. I think because it's so traditional in the context of Zelda compared to the other ones where they're these big dramatic set pieces, spectacle above all else. But this one is purely gameplay, like traditional Star Fox Adventures standard gameplay, utilizing Tricky, figuring out the weak points, and going from there.
It is probably the most elaborate fight in the game.
Yeah.
I'd also say.
I think also because Galdon is this unspecified beast that has no clear analog to the rest of the Dinosaur Planet tribes, I just kind of like check out. I'm like, I don't know what you are, so I don't want to think about it that much. But it's an enjoyable fight. I like it. I like that all the boss fights are attached to getting spell stones besides Andross at the end, but.
And I do like with this boss and the one after it, they do an interesting thing about like where the spellstone is.
Right. Yeah, because Galdon just swallows it. Which, what happens when you pass a spellstone? Like, what would that look like? What would that night of hell be like? King Redeye. Boss Redeye, according to our avatar gallery, is the... it's funny, because I guess he's the second boss in the game, but I think of him so much in terms of, like, endgame.
Yeah, me too. I don't really think about how, like, the second boss of the game happens so late in it.
Yeah, I guess if you consider the Galleon to be a boss fight, then it's the third boss. But yeah, it's relatively late in the game, but it's not endgame. It's just late in the game. And it's weird that it plays tricks on me, because I always associate the walled city with the end of the game. And I think that's because you go back there after Dragon Rock, and that's where Fox and Tricky say goodbye. But
I feel like it's also like I think of again we've already established like trying to apply structure to Star Fox Adventures is kind of a losing battle, but because the four well the locations you have to go out into space, it's Dark Ice Mines, Walled City, Dragon Rock. I always think of and Krazoa Palace. I always think of like Walled City as like it's like it's the 75% mark, even though it's not
right
at all.
No. Cloud Runner Fortress is the other place.
Cloud Runner Fortress. That's the one I was blanking on.
Yeah.
It's
Krazoa Palace does set up the final boss fight, but yeah.
It's 3 out of 4. I was so blanking on Cloud Runner Fortress.
Well, because Cloud Runner Fortress doesn't have a traditional boss fight. It's
which is a shame I blanked on it because Cloud Runner Fortress does have some of my favorite bits in the game. Like you get the Sharp Claw disguise. It's got Fox meeting scales in person for the first time. It's got the like treasure hoard vault that looks really cool and has your first hint that Scales is kind of a shitty boss when he literally picks up one of his goons and uses him as a meat shield to keep Fox from shooting at him.
Right, and you get another speeder bike sequence too, which I'm glad they found use for more than one. And I really like Cloud Runner Fortress too because it has kind of that Japanese garden kind of vibe to it. It's got like the cherry blossoms, and
it's another one where the game's like standout color like direction comes through because I remember Cloud Runner Fortress, it's the teal one.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, there's no traditional boss fight there, so I don't really have a lot to say about it other than I remember being confused when General Scales teleported away. I was like, oh, he has a personal teleporter now? Okay, I'll roll
on his belt.
Yeah.
Which I guess was always there, even in Dinosaur Planet.
Yeah, it's one of those holdovers.
Again, there's so many things in this where like there's so many things that got thrown out in service of making it a Star Fox game, but way fewer than you'd think.
Yeah, it's amazing how close it actually does hew to Dinosaur Planet. For all the lamentation about losing Dinosaur Planet and what could have been, and yeah, they had to cut some things to get it out on time, but it's actually pretty close. I think, if anything, they just made the story a little bit more concise.
We also can't really say, like, I think, like, well, if Dinosaur Planet came out and it never became a Star Fox game, but it still got moved to the GameCube, how much of this stuff still would have gotten cut just to get the game out?
Right. There's a large part of Dinosaur Planet, like the whole total package. It starts to feel a little bit like the really convoluted backstory of Lord of the Rings, like the Silmarillion, and you were just like, wait, what? What? I can't keep up with this. I'm sorry. Keep it simple. Just talk about Sauron and the ring, please. And I feel like they did make Star Fox Adventures, even though it is still probably the most convoluted, complex, obtuse plot in any Rare game, at least any Rare DKU game. I still think it makes more sense than it would have had it just been Dinosaur Planet and you add in everything. The whole enchilada would have just been a bit too much. I like that. The only reason people don't pick up on Star Fox Adventures is the whole story is they're not really paying attention or they're not pulling the threads together that Rare doesn't specifically weave together for you. But yeah. Anyway,
I guess we got really off of King Red Eye.
Yeah, we did.
I guess the walled city in general. I do like that for how short a stay they have in this game. Like the T-Rex presence in this game does feel properly scary. Both with the rank and file, which. Like, you're told outright, like, you have no hope of defeating them. You gotta go, like, get a staff upgrade that will let you stand a chance. It
definitely fucks with you as far as your fear. You know, it makes them in this intimidating thing, even if generally they're not that imposing, you feel like they are, and they're T-Rexes.
Yeah, I mean, it's a T-rated game. They're not going to rip Fox in half on screen.
Right,
but
like in Conqueror's Bad Fur Day, but it's still it's kind of gives you the Snacker in Banjo-Kazooie vibe, where just the presentation alone is enough to put you on edge, even if fundamentally it's not that bothersome.
There's even like a nice build-up with like similar to Galdon. Like Scales has like the king is locked away. He's not like out running about. He's like basically in a dungeon, and you kind of get this like nice little build up with Tricky's dad, where you have to like get the keys, which are like fangs that you put in a statue to open up the door to reach him. And the whole like the chamber where you do this has like a very creepy vibe to it.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're gonna like. You're unlocking your Dennis Nedry, like the turning off the power to like let something out.
Yeah.
It's like there's a lot of like a good sense of danger to it, and also with the fight itself, in the staging of it, where quite a lot of the time you're in a narrow hallway staring at a T-Rex, and you kind of. The boss fight mechanic is like almost like a bullfight kind of situation.
A little bit, yeah.
Which I will confess sometimes like creates awkward camera stuff. Like the easiest way to die in this fight is just lose track of where the king is and he runs over you while you're looking at something else.
Sure. We didn't learn anything from Stompadon in Banjo-Tooie.
No, we did not. But I do like this little bit where you're like, yeah, you'll stare at him, he'll growl at you, and then start running toward you, and you have to try and electrocute him before he reaches you.
Yeah. I think it's the most intense boss fight, and maybe the most intense encounter in the entire game. I remember my palms sweating just from the presentation alone. I was very, very relieved when I pulled this off and pulled the Spellstone out of him.
Yeah, speaking of spellstones in weird places, I love how gross this is with the spellstone lodged in his head that Fox has to like pry out like he's using a screwdriver to like open a tight paint can lid.
Doesn't it make a squishing noise when he does?
I think it makes a noise, and also there's like a really specific indent to where it used to be in his skull.
Yeah,
that makes it like all the more like grody, but it's a fun disgusting. I really like it.
Yeah, it definitely is, and I think it really does pay off the promise of T-Rex in your dinosaur game. I think having it be a big boss spectacle, having it be something like this where you are this trapped prey, essentially. You are one of the goats that is getting fed to the T-Rex in Jurassic Park, and because of that, it just feels so satisfying.
This seems like a fight built around that scene in Jurassic Park of them looking in the rearview mirror.
Yeah,
at the T-Rex and saying objects are closer than they appear. Right.
Yeah, it's well done. They definitely pulled it off in a satisfactory manner. And that's why I think King Red-Eye, Boss Red-Eye, whatever, is probably my favorite boss fight in the game, not including Andross, just for the twist alone. But Dracor, Boss Dracor, is the boss of Dragon Rock, which I always mix up with Walled City because of the sort of back and forth hopping of Star Fox Adventures. I'm like, no, Dragon Rock was after Red-Eye, and because Dracor was the original antagonist of Dinosaur Planet. That's right. And then he got shunted down to like third build villain status. But I don't really mourn Dracor all that much. He's a cool design. He's basically just Satan in what was it, Legend? That Tom Cruise movie. He just looks like the devil in that movie.
It's a fun design, and I like how much of it was kept from Dinosaur Planet.
Yeah.
I do think it's like a matter of, this is such a cool design, we don't want to waste it. And I'm glad they didn't.
I'm glad they didn't, and I like that he's in there. I like their new story for him, that he's just this genetic abomination, maybe created from DNA strands of all the captured dinosaur tribes that you free throughout Dragon Rock, which is the fourth area you fly to in an R-Wing, one of the sacred lands that the Spellstone
did it before Jurassic World.
Yes, did it way before Chris Pratt was an A-lister voicing Mario. But yeah, this is the fourth sacred land, and it's implied that basically the Sharp Claw have taken it over and basically done the Kremlin thing where they've made it this wasteland due to their technological and industrial meddling.
It's funny, like most of the other places in the game I remember for their environment. I don't really remember Dragon Rock for that, partly because it's a barren wasteland. What I remember it more for is that it's the game's like dinosaur highlight reel.
Yeah.
Because like rapid fire, you meet an Earthwalker and you get to ride around on him and ram into things, and you meet a high top and you like have to free them and like stand looking up at them and like take in like how big this character is.
And
you get the Cloud Runner from the opening again.
Yeah, and I like how you have this idea of the dinosaur resistance of the Sharp Claw, like outside of Team Star Fox. Like there is this organized rebuttal to what General Scales is doing.
And like outside of all the normal like alignments of the rest of the planet you've seen too, because it's species ostensibly from 3 entirely different tribes who have all come together as friends. I guess 4 if you include their Thorntail friend.
Yeah.
Who is the gatekeeper.
Yeah.
All like uniting to fight Scales, and it didn't turn out well for them, but you're going to change that.
Right. Yeah. It really cool setup. The boss fight for Dracor itself, though, it's not my favorite in the game. I mean, it's fine. It's just there for me. So
here, I am unable to, I think, talk about Dracor's boss fight with any kind of impartiality because I think I've got a childhood story to relate for you, Hyle.
Sure, I love childhood stories.
So the first time I tried to fight Dracor, and Star Fox Adventures was a game that I had to, and this is one of the rare times like I was the kid who like needed somebody else to help me with the game.
Mm-hmm.
And it was because the earlier part of the game had those twice mandatory hit the A button really, really fast challenges with a rubber band AI.
Yeah.
I just like kid me was not, I don't know, coordinated enough to handle this, or never once thought for a second like to stress these challenges aren't nearly as bad as something like Canary Mary and Banjo-Tooie.
Right.
But they are mandatory to complete the game. And like I would have people say like, "Oh no, it's easy, like just like, you know, don't use your thumb or use your index finger, or like the trick is to hold it." And I'm thinking, well, if I have to hold the controller away other than what it says in the manual or what the paragraph of text in the game told me to do, that's not good design. But anyway, I had a hard time with those when I was a kid. I've gotten to the point where I can do them just fine now. Still not the case with Canary Mary. I usually have to do some kind of weird controller gymnastics to beat her, but anyway.
Yeah, spoon on the controller for me was weirdly how I did it. I don't even know.
But anyway, that's all besides the point. Because of that, there were like some weird progression things I'd run into with playing Star Fox Adventures, and one of them was like I was kind of like tag teaming the game with my friend's sister who could do the rapid button press segments really well. And we got to Dracor, and we made the mistake of I'm a person who like saves obsessively in games like all the time.
Same.
And learned the hard way. It turns out if you save in a boss fight in Star Fox Adventures, you have saved the health that you came in with in that fight.
Oh no.
And because the preceding section before you get to Dracor is an on-rail shooting segment, I went into the fight with 2 slivers of health. And
oh no.
You can beat Dracor with 2 slivers of health, but not when you're a child. Probably
Cameron,
not.
I have a question. I have a realization. Is this why you can take out the Ashen Lords by yourself in Sea of Thieves? And you don't need anybody's help? Because you went through the Dracor fight with only 2 slivers of health.
Well, no, because I didn't make it through the Dracor fight. I had to, like, replay the game up to Dracor.
Oh, shit. Okay. Never mind. I thought that would be a good origin story for that bizarre skill set you've revealed yourself to have.
No, but, like, nowadays, like, when I've fought Dracor, I don't, like, form any kind of opinion about it because I just go, oh, that was way easier than the first time I tried. Because if you can just kind of... There's a lot of stuff to, like, dodge and, like, things to shut off in that fight, but if you come into it with a full health bar, you can just, like, you just shoot Dracor before that stuff finishes you off, and you're fine.
Yeah. Well, I can't top that story, so let's move on. General Scales. What a boss fight this was. So, a lot of people don't like that General Scales doesn't actually present you any sort of fight, that he passes out and dies, presumably, before you have a chance to really go toe-to-toe with him. And, I don't know, I've never really mourned the fact that General Scales wasn't this big dramatic sequence. Like, I think it works well for the story that, no, he's basically the red herring. Like, he's important to the plot, but he's not the driving force behind all of this. And I think just having him essentially have a heart attack or stroke or whatever and die at your feet, it works. I can understand because you've been primed as a player to want to get your hands on General Scales after everything. And it's just kind of a tease.
Yeah, we had a whole test of fear about it.
Right, Fox was terrified of the guy, apparently. But I've never really had as much issue with this as other people do. I can respect the opinion, and I get it for sure, but it's always kind of rolled off my back.
I'll be honest, I don't like it, but I also like, there are aspects of it I do like. Like, first and foremost, I don't mind that he got hijacked in favor of Andross. I think that's a fun story, and as we've established, it was in Dinosaur Planet from the beginning. Like, narratively, I think it's fine. I do, like, and the more distance I get from it, and the more we kind of absorb the idea of, like, Scales as kind of a nobody villain who suddenly rose to power entirely off of the back of the ghostly devil on his shoulder. Like, that is, like, him being kind of a pathetic loser is in a way also satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think, like, from a gameplay, like, standpoint, like, from a player standpoint, it would have been more satisfying to, like, have, like, even a cursory battle with him, and that there's also 2 other things kind of informing my opinion on that, informing my idea that, like, things maybe could have gone a different way. One is, in what we've seen of the original Dinosaur Planet, I think there was a lot more room to breathe with the idea that Scales was kind of a pathetic villain.
Mm-hmm.
Because they do, in, like, various versions of the game we've seen like build in the idea of like, I think there's an early version of the scene on the galleon where he just kind of clumsily falls off or gets struck by lightning, or
right.
like you get the idea of like, oh, maybe this guy doesn't 100% have it together. And of course you have Dracor being more prominent, and you can kind of like see the disparity between like who the real brains of the operation is. So like I think in Adventures you don't really have much in the way to telegraph that Scales is kind of a loser before the big reveal happens that he is.
Yeah.
The other part is, well, we know for a fact that the game's development was truncated, and like we had word from scribes back in the day, like when asked, why does the game only have one final boss, and it's Andross? They wanted to do a Scales fight. There's unused dialogue of like Falco offering to help you fight Scales.
Yeah.
And you know, with this hard, immovable one day before the ink is dry on the buyout deadline, the team had to like make the call and focus on only one final boss for the game. And when you can only do one final boss, you make it the man behind the man, not the pawn.
Right. It was the right call to make in a very unenviable situation behind the scenes. And I'm glad it came out the way it did. You're right. Like there was no other option. They had to have the Andross thing in there. So to make the pawn expendable as far as boss fights go, absolutely the right call. Having that understanding, nobody should have any issue with it. But I understand out of context, the way it was presented, it was disappointing to people because everybody was ready to throw down with General Scales, and we didn't get that.
As a consequence, there is a really fun, implementation thing with the quote-unquote Scales fight, which is when he confronts you at Krazoa Palace and kind of does the, like, come at me, bro, bit. The thing that activates the cutscene where Andross tells him to stop fighting you and stand down will not trigger until you pull the staff out.
Uh-huh.
But because Scales isn't coded to attack you either, you can just kind of like sit there in the chamber in Krazoa Palace while the threatening music plays, and Scales like just kind of hops around in his battle stance, and he will do nothing. You can just kind of walk around the room leisurely, like pace in place, play around with the items in your inventory. He'll just stand there.
Shame you can't like throw Tricky's ball at his face.
I hadn't tried. I mean, you don't have Tricky at that point. I don't even know if I don't think you have the ball anymore.
Yeah, no, he would want to give that to Tricky. But yeah, I
maybe that was the way to take Scales down. You say, go get it.
Yeah, we'll never know. But yeah, I'm fine with it. General Scales is what he is. He serves the narrative well. I don't mourn him. At the end of the day, he's basically K. Rool with a smaller snout, in my opinion.
And it is satisfying to see his goons all like gather around his corpse and celebrate.
Do they gather around his corpse?
Like, not even a second after he died.
Okay, yeah.
Like, is it his corpse, or is he just, like, unconscious? We don't know, but he's definitely not in power anymore.
Considering they're waving around his belt at the end of the game on top of Krazoa Palace, I think you might assume that he died.
They just laughed at him as he ran around with his pants down and shamed him out of the tribe, I guess.
Yeah, I think the older that I get, the more I lean towards he probably died from the stress of the Krazoa leaving his body and whatever.
Yeah, I don't actually know how that made him, like, if he did die in that moment, I don't exactly know what is supposed to have caused his death.
I think the Krazoa forcibly removing itself rather than easily passing out like it does with Fox and Krystal.
Yeah, I mean, even for Fox and Krystal, it doesn't seem like a pleasant experience.
It's painful. But I think, it's like going out via the heart as opposed to the nasal cavities. I don't know, but
yeah, I don't know. And he is like at least going by the age he was supposed to be in Dinosaur Planet, like canonically a lot older than they are.
Yeah. I don't know. The older I get, the more I realize that the only consequences for people like General Scales are death. Like there's no like imprisonment for somebody like him. So yeah, he probably died. And that takes us to the Andross fight, where, you know, Fox brings back all of the Krazoa spirits to Krazoa Palace. The last one is released, and all the Krazoa sort of channel around this divining rod that Andross has devised. The crystal is trapped in, and it's enough spiritual energy that it channels into the Krazoa statue behind this device, and Andross is waiting in there, and it restores his body. Andross comes back to life.
This is so goofy to watch play out, and I love it.
It's incredibly goofy and campy. I would say campy is the optimal word.
It campy in the way that like it knows what it's doing and it's having fun.
It's having so much fun with it, and yeah, this Krazoa head sort of starts levitating, sort of like the bird heads in Super Mario Brothers 2. Like the one at the very end, you know?
Yeah.
It reminds me of that, where you're like, oh, what the hell is this? And what we know to be Andross now says, you know, at last I have been reborn, the mighty Krazoa god. And he was like, you will bow to me. And Krystal's like, we will never bow to you. And Krystal grabs the staff and starts firing just aimless shots.
And again, Fox standing there just like jaw to the floor, head cocked, like, really? What? Really? This is happening?
Yeah, and Fox just takes off. He's like, all right, I'm gonna get to my R-Wing now. Like, this thing is probably going into space. I need to check it out from the comfort of my cockpit. I don't think just firing the staff at it is going to do any good. And it doesn't really give you much time to sit with it. This very second Fox gets into space with the R-Wing, the Krazoa head flips around, and it's Andross, and Fox is like, Andross! And they have a little chat, and they start fighting. Boom, end of game boss fight right here. But it might be my favorite Andross fight in the entire Star Fox series, solely because it is attached to my favorite Star Fox game. And it's such a fun, emotional capper when you realize, oh, it's Andross behind it. And it doesn't feel cheap in the way, oh, they couldn't do something original. It has to be Andross again, because it's so clever in the way they construct Andross's resurrection and the way they weave that back into the Dinosaur Planet narrative, that it doesn't feel cheap. It feels clever and earned.
It's also, again, similar to what I said about the Star Fox. I mean, the space shooter segments in the last episode. This was a time when even just like seeing Andross come back in this like fancy on this console with its fancy new graphical capabilities was a really big deal.
Yeah,
like Andross looks really cool and gross in this game. It's and he's got like really fun animation, like his mouth flapping around when his head explodes, or his like glowing orange eyes and like gross skin. It's really striking, and I do think it is probably my favorite Andross fight. And I also like, again, marrying the two worlds again with Star Fox and Dinosaur Planet. You get this arrangement of the Andross brain theme from Star Fox 64, but it's arranged with like the instrumentation you've been hearing throughout the game on Dinosaur Planet.
Yeah.
With like these brassy horns.
And you've got that same duality with just Andross's design, because the back of it is the Krazoa statue head, And then, then it flips around and there's Andross, and he does some of his same techniques that he does in Star Fox 64. But yeah, it's also great to see Rare do a primate character, a simian character that's not a Kong or, their ilk. It's just this creepy, disembodied giant head with like just this sinister undertone to it, these disgusting features. It's really cool to see. And of course, Falco flies in. He gives you bomb replenishments, so it's kind of like Han Solo swooping in at the Death Star, but not quite the same. He just basically, but he does tee up Fox for the winning shots.
Like, kind of narratively, he's like showing Fox the way to beat him as well.
Yeah, so it communicates to you, the player, oh, this is the way you take him out. Really well done. I love everything about this, and it's a really great way to incorporate Falco. It feels earned as far as Falco goes as well. Like, okay, here's Falco, and of course he would come back at the very last moment in this big climactic fight.
He comes in at the last moment to save the day, and like everything you need to know about Falco happens in that split second he comes back, because he comes back, immediately figures out how to beat the boss, helps you do it, and gives you shit with this smug little comment about it.
Right. But, of course, Falco's not going to help you out throughout Star Fox Adventures. It makes sense that he would come back in the R-Wing side by side with Fox.
No, he was out getting a cool leather jacket.
I love Falco's design. I mean, I love everybody's design in this game. I think, outside of Krystal, maybe, this is probably my favorite take on the entire Team Star Fox.
Yeah, I like how, again, everybody except Krystal is kind of, on the Star Fox team, it feels like, it feels informed by their Star Fox 64 character designs. Like, okay, we all had matching outfits, and it's been so many years since, like, how have you, like, individually tailored since then?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, Slippy ditched the jacket because it's easier to just work in a shirt. Peppy's wearing a big, like, elaborate long coat and, like, fashioned his bandana into a tie because he's, like, not really, he's just kind of sitting around doing, like, map making. Fox went, like, sleeveless and ditched his helmet because he's going planet side and walking around now.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really, like, fun, slight tweaking of everybody.
It is. And I miss Fox's little adventuring vest. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess we have this game to thank for Fox not wearing a helmet in Assault, I guess.
I guess, yeah. But yeah, Andross blows up, and I guess this is canonically his final death. I know Command sort of tips into its toes into the Andross waters a little bit, but I think this is
in a way that makes clear, like, this isn't really him and he's definitely dead.
Yeah, so, I mean, Rare was the one who actually killed off Andross. I mean, I know Nintendo killed him off and then Rare brought him back, but Rare's death is the one that stuck. So I like that after this, like, it's like Andross is out of options and he's just got to either be a disembodied spirit or just, I don't know, go off into the netherworld.
It's a Nintendo series where it's all right for the main villain to not always come back because you definitely murdered him.
Yep. And Fox returns, or Fox watches the Krazoa spirits restore Dinosaur Planet. Like, all the pieces of the planet are mended, and with the Spellstones back in the Force Point temples, the magical integrity of the planet will keep it together. And Fox returns to the Great Fox, and everybody has a chat, and they kind of have this little catch-up where we learn everybody's doing well on Dinosaur Planet. Tricky says hi.
It's a very rapid-fire, almost like sitcom finale kind of ending.
A little bit, yeah.
Which again, it's fun. And I like the little bit of General Pepper having to pass along that Tricky says hi.
Because of course Tricky would want to get that in there, like, you know, make sure you tell Fox I said hi, and it's just very true to what a little kid who is sort of intoxicated by being friends with a big shot space hero would want to do. Like, get me in there. And it's sweet. I love everything about Fox and Tricky. I don't care. But yeah, it's like a sitcom ending until Krystal shows up, and then it becomes a Bond ending, which because yeah, Krystal just flies into the Great Fox and wants to thank Fox personally.
Flies in on one of the like commandeered Sharpclaw ships. Is
that what it is? Because we never saw Krystal's own ship.
Yeah, it's the carrier that they like beam a Tricky down from on Ice Mountain.
Okay, yeah, you're right. Because yeah, we never saw what Krystal actually got the dinosaur planet in. We just see her on the Cloud Runner at the beginning of the game.
It's actually a I ended up using this ship in the Rare Archipelago map I drew all those years back as like a little joke that only I would get, which is if you look at Timbers Island on that map, because we ran with the whole thing of like everybody in Dino Domain is a Dinosaur Planet immigrant,
right?
Or at least it was founded by them. I ran with the idea of, well, they would have caught there in a spaceship, and because they're all dinosaurs, maybe they weren't the best at piloting it. So on Timbers Island, on that map, is one of those Sharpclaw ships wedged in the volcano side.
That's a great touch. And yeah, we'll talk more about the interstellar exodus of some of the Saurians led by King Tricky. Probably when we do a Star Fox Assault spotlight. But because Star Fox Assault kind of sets it up. But
this game ends on a weird note with this this joke about Fox being horny.
Yeah, because Krystal comes in and says she wants to thank Fox personally, and then Fox comes in. And then I think like Peppy and Slippy and maybe Falco, I can't remember. They start like chiding Fox, like, "Oh,
R.O.B does."
Well, I know R.O.B. I know R.O.B does. I couldn't remember the order because I know everybody's chuckling, and then R.O.B is like, "My sensors indicate Fox's temperature is rising," and everyone's like, "Oh, Fox is horny."
Slippy just kind of like said, "You're not shy, are you, Fox?"
Yeah, Peppy's like, "I thought you gave Krystal's staff back to her. What's that?" Oh.
You say that there actually is a blooper in this cutscene.
Oh my god, is there?
Yeah, Fox has Krystal's staff on his back.
Oh, that's right.
He didn't give it back.
That's weird. Yeah, how do we explain that? There has to be a plausible explanation.
Slippy made a double because he figured Fox got so used to using it as a weapon.
Yeah, maybe, Fox ran off, but maybe Krystal threw the staff to the R-Wing as he was flying off.
Nah, she was still shooting at Andross when it happened. I mean, maybe it's a hologram staff.
All right, that's ridiculous. Why would I ever use that as a get out of jail free card for a canon blooper? I hate when stuff like this happens, though, because it drives me crazy. There's gotta be an explanation for it. I'll figure it out. Don't worry. We'll do a whole episode about the answer behind the second staff. We came up with a reason for the second Royston at the beginning of Banjo-Tooie that shouldn't have been there. So I'm sure we can come up with a reason for the second staff. Anyway, yeah, it basically ends like a Bond movie where there's a joke, some innuendo, and some implied fucking. And Krystal's telepathic, so I'm sure like she got a good read on Fox, even in their brief limited time on that rooftop on Krazoa Palace. And it's like, yeah, sure, whatever. I don't have anywhere else to go. I'll just move into the Great Fox, which we see in Star Fox Assault. She does. It is kind of weird. Just they're in a relationship now because of course they've known each other for all of 1 minute. And whatever, they're fucking. It's fine. What sells it is David Wise's porno sax. For me. Which is the Krystal theme, but
it's a very indulgent track, but I really, really like it. It is just a really fun song.
Yeah.
on sax.
The entirety of the Star Fox Adventures soundtrack is I right up there with David Wise's best. It's my favorite soundtrack on the Nintendo GameCube, and I like it just as much as the Donkey Kong Country ones. I think so many of these tracks would be right at home on a Donkey Kong GameCube platformer made by Rare, had it been made by Rare. I don't know, like, just to go down the list, obviously Thorntail Hollow is one of my favorite. Cape Claw, of course, and just the whole credits medley of the David Wise's version of the Star Fox theme and the hard rock. Like, I'm gonna shred some guitar now just because.
That medley, I think, is my most, like, re-listened to bit of the soundtrack. It is, like, for a few reasons. Like, one, it's the, like, I think the specific, like, our songs chosen are a good, like, roller coaster to, like, close out the game and, like, also Rare's tenure with Nintendo.
Yeah.
As a second party, because you kind of get, like, the slow build of the Star Fox theme from the game's intro, which I unfortunately don't think we've ever heard in full anywhere without, like, sound effects over it. I don't think it's... Because this is a game that didn't get a soundtrack release.
No. Consequence of the buyout, probably, where some of the promotional stuff may have been cut short.
Also, just Nintendo not releasing soundtracks, but that's a discussion for another day.
Yeah.
That honestly, for as good as the original Dinosaur Planet like carryover tracks are in this game, that have kind of like our return to the more like ambient style of DKC 1.
Mm-hmm.
And are like really place setting and atmospheric. This Area 6 arrangement, that's the second song in this, I think it's my favorite song in the entire game.
Yeah.
This guitar track, like I'm always a sucker for especially from David Wise, like songs with extreme like electric guitar, like my favorite songs in Tropical Freeze are are the boss themes he did.
Yeah,
for the same reason.
Where you got a little bit of like heavy metal, sort of like tied in with the Viking thing. Yeah,
and of course we know on this track that that guitar is provided by Grant Kirkhope.
Oh yeah, that's right.
He brought him in to do it.
You know, it's funny because you mentioned Grant, and I was just thinking the thing about Star Fox Adventures and it being a David Wise score is that this is like coming after a relatively long period of quietness from David Wise at Rare. Because obviously he had such a huge outsized role in the early days of the DKU, you know, led the first two Donkey Kong Country games, or at least played a significant part in the first Donkey Kong Country game, and then did the sequel. And then did Diddy Kong Racing, and then Grant Kirkhope sort of exploded everywhere, and Grant Kirkhope did like game after game after game, like juggling multiple plates.
I cannot like conceive of the amount of work Grant Kirkhope did in like 3 years' time on the N64. It's insane to me.
Yeah, and David Wise, and then Robin Beanland also did his own fair share around that time, and
this was like kind of coming after a bit of a lull in David Wise's soundtracks, and unfortunately would precede another lull because, as we'd find out, David Wise kept being assigned to projects that would get canceled.
Kind of an unfortunate set of circumstances. Was he going to do Donkey Kong Racing?
Well, he was going to do Saberman Stampede.
Well, so I imagine Donkey Kong Racing would have been his project then, which would make sense considering the historical precedent of Diddy Kong Racing. But yeah, it's a shame because David Wise kind of got just jammed up in limbo due to unfortunate luck. And yeah, I mean, when you factor in 5 years between Diddy Kong Racing and Star Fox Adventures, and that was just 5 years without David Wise really gracing us with his presence on a major project like this. So to finally have it, you know, was like manna from heaven. It was just literally music for my ears. I adore David Wise and everything he brings acoustically to the games he makes. And I think Star Fox Adventures was a really good fit for him. because you could sort of go back to a little bit of that ambient sort of stylings of the original Donkey Kong Country, but David Wise just works well with tropical environments and sort of more tribal beats. And
like I know David Wise has kind of got like pigeonholed now as like you're the go-to like atmospheric platformer composer, which is maybe unfair to his abilities because he has extremely good range.
So does Grant Kirkhope.
But like,
I mean, yeah,
but what he's good at, he's exceptionally good at.
I think both David and Grant have been pigeonholed, for better or for worse, as two very specific styles. Robin Beanland is kind of both a blessing and a curse. Robin Beanland doesn't get as much credit or notoriety as the two of them because he's never been sort of typecast in that one style, and he's just kind of provided so much diversity in sound during his tenure at Rare, and he's never gotten kind of like stuck in that role. But because of that, people don't think of Robin Beanland as much because, oh, that's a David Wise song. That's a Grant Kirkhope song. And then you got the chameleon over here just doing whatever. But both David and Grant are capable of doing their own, outside of the box compositions. They just don't get that opportunity as much.
Yeah, and like to that end, though, like this is after Donkey Kong 64 had such a different sound to it than any of Rare's Donkey Kong games before, which is what the game itself demanded. It's a very different kind of Donkey Kong game.
Yeah.
Star Fox Adventures is a game that like convinces me like, oh, you could do a 3D Donkey Kong game, and both aesthetically and in its soundtrack, you could like completely follow a different path than what DK64 did.
Absolutely. I've often said that, yes, we didn't get a Rare Donkey Kong game on the GameCube, but if you squint just enough and sort of ignore the dinosaurs and the spaceships, Star Fox Adventures feels like a Donkey Kong game spiritually in so many ways. And that's why it just synced up with me so quickly, because I'm a sucker for wilderness, tropical environments, and just a game that's just rooted in an earthiness. Ironically, in this case, not of Earth, but, all the same, it feels spiritually true to what Rare did in 1994 with Donkey Kong Country. And so it's a nice way to bring things full circle, both in presentation and with the soundtrack as they closed out their tenure, at least on the consoles, with Nintendo. Before we move on from the audio portion of our gushing, I guess for this game we're gushing, we have to talk a little bit more about the voice acting, because this is such an important part of any Star Fox game, as I said, but Star Fox Adventures is unique in that it utilizes the cast at Rare. The people who work at Rare, so many of them provided the voices of the characters, which I've always loved about Rare, especially Rare back in this day where they would just do it all in-house and they wouldn't use professional voice actors.
It's honestly, like, I look back and I'm impressed it's anywhere near as good as it is, given that they were casting it that way.
Yeah, it works. Everybody works. And the wild thing is the pre-existing Star Fox characters, everybody feels true, for the most part, to who they were in Star Fox 64. Like, Steve Malpass is Fox, so we hear the most of Steve Malpass, but I buy Steve Malpass as the same Fox from Star Fox 64.
It's so strange that I think of any returning character in this game, Steve Malpass as Fox is just like hands down the most perfect casting. He sounds enough like Mike West did in Star Fox 64, but also like just tweaked a little bit enough where I can believe it's like the same person, just a few years down the line, after like some more tumultuous things have happened in his life. He's got like a good like tone as Fox, is like kind of, again, he sells the like slightly irritated, kind of cynical, kind of tired.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a really perfect Fox McCloud. Extremely well cast, and just the funniest thing I will never get over is it's entirely a coincidence because he was just doing the same voice that he did for Saber.
Yeah.
Because a lot of Saber's dialogue is just straight up in Star Fox Adventures, completely unchanged.
I guess it's kismet. I guess Dinosaur Planet was always destined to be Star Fox Adventures. They didn't know it at the time when they were breaking it down and casting Saber and whatever, but it was always supposed to be this way. So whenever we mourn Dinosaur Planet, I don't think we're really grasping that this was always the project this was supposed to be in some grand cosmic sense. Estelle Ellis is Krystal, and Krystal is an original character, and because she's an original character, they could do a natural English accent and didn't have to bend it to be this approximation of an American accent as seen in Star Fox 64. And because of that, it's stuck with Krystal. Even after Rare, Krystal has had an English accent, a British accent.
Alicia Glidewell played her in Assault, and I do not think she's a British voice actor. Definitely putting on a British accent in Assault.
Yeah. And then in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, her brief line of dialogue, which what do they pull that from? Is that...
It's pulled from Assault.
Okay,
it's pulled from the multiplayer. Alicia Glidewell also played her in Brawl for the calm lines that Krystal gets. Which
I always forget Krystal's in the lines in Brawl.
Which I remember getting her in trouble because she listed herself as playing Krystal in Super Smash Bros. Brawl on her website. Before the roster had been completely announced.
Oh.
So people were taking that as evidence that Krystal was going to be a fighter in Assault. I mean, in Brawl.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're here to talk about Estelle.
Yeah. No, I think it's great. I think it's iconic, and I don't have a lot to say about it considering how little time we spend with Krystal, but
I do have to say, I'm impressed with Estelle's performance in one aspect, which I think of any actor in the game, she has to deliver the most in the nonsense Dino Planet language and sell it.
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say, I know Kev has to do a bit as tricky, but you're right.
He gets one sentence.
Yeah.
Or one sentence and a offhand line.
Mm-hmm.
John Silk has to do quite a bit of it as General Scales, but I think in pure volume, Estelle gets the bulk of it, especially the speech she gives to Fox, teaching him the answering machine message telling him how to use the staff. Which we'd learn was originally recorded in English and then re-recorded in Dino language.
Yeah, makes you wonder. I better record a message just in case I ever lose my staff and somebody finds it. I'm not that proactive. It's I don't even lock my phone.
I guess a question about Krystal I have is so she's speaking Saurian in the prologue, and in the staff pre-recording, and in the mental projection that she does when the Andross head shows up and says she needs the Krazoa spirits to live.
Mm-hmm.
So when she shows up at the end of the game and is speaking English, and from then on, was she always bilingual? Is this still Fox's translator translating for her? Did she learn I don't know, Lilat Basic or whatever the the equivalent language to English is sometime off screen between Adventures and Assault? Because she presumably can speak the same language as Starwolf because they talk to her in Assault.
So here's my fan interpretation of it. I think it was the translator doing the heavy lifting for her at the end of Star Fox Adventures with Fox, and then by the time of Assault, she has learned whatever language they are speaking. English as a coded Lilat military, Cornerian military language or whatever.
I guess if you're a telepath, that also probably makes it easier because you can pick up on like what basic concepts are and what the equivalent words for them are.
Sure, we'll go with that. Got to talk about Kev Bayless as Tricky. He does such a good job of coming across as a little kid. And as we've talked about, it's amazing looking at the progression of Tricky from Star Fox Adventures to Star Fox Assault to Diddy Kong Racing. I can totally buy this as the kid version of both of the other iterations. And I don't know, I love this portrayal. I think it's fantastic. I know Kev has been on record as feeling like a little down on how people found Tricky to be annoying, but and like you talked with him at MagFest the other year, and you basically had to convey, no, we unironically adore Tricky.
Yeah, myself and Cammy like handed him like art we did of Tricky like that night, and he kind of responded with a shock, like, "Oh, you like him." Or like, you actually like him. And he like started his he like gave a presentation at that show as well, and kind of like started off like apologizing for playing Tricky.
Yeah.
I hope like he's kind of softened on that as like time has gone on, and like people have like come up to him like, no, we love Tricky. Tricky's great. And I think a part of it is also like self-deprecation, but I mean, right now, he's got, like, Tricky as his Twitter avatar, so I think he's embraced Tricky a little bit.
I was going to say, recently Playtonic did a charity auction where a lot of their staff did artwork that be auctioned off. I did bid on Kev Bayless's Diddy Kong beat artwork, but I was outbid, and I couldn't, in good conscience, like, actually keep increasing my bid. I was like, no, unfortunately, I'm just going to have to make do without original Diddy artwork from the creator of Diddy Kong. I have to make do with my my Lee Loveday Mr. Pants doodle that I've got framed on my wall. But anyway, yeah, he also did an original Tricky drawing, and I was like, oh, that's good to see. I hope that Cameron and Cammy actually put that idea in his head, inceptioned it into his head that no, we actually do like Tricky. Like there are many of us out there who adore Tricky, and I think that's what's hard for a lot of the people at Rare, at least Rare back in the day, is they probably did internalize a lot of that negativity around this time period, but they didn't have a direct line of communication with people like DK Vine or Rare Gamer or Rare Thief, or where we're the true blue believers, and we are the fans who lap this up. And I think they understand now, both at Rare and Playtonic, that no, there are people who unironically loved what they did with this stuff. So I hope that's come through loud and clear to Kev, that no, we love Tricky.
Yeah, Tricky is great, and Kev's performance is really great. He really sells like the naive little kid behavior, and like, again, like anthropomorphic pet child thing Tricky has to encompass.
He goes right up to the line of being a brat, and is a brat when it's called for, but never to the point where he's obnoxious. He's always endearing, and it really works then too when the thaw happens between him and Fox, and they've got that sort of Indiana Jones short round kind of dynamic where it's this mentor and this little kid who looks up to him and thinks the world of him, and just never fails to move my heartstrings. Chris Seaver is in the game. So when talking about like Rare staff who did big roles in this game, Chris Seaver is sort of pulling double duty in that he does two Team Star Fox members, Peppy and Slippy. And of course, Chris Seaver has kind of been immortalized as a result of his contributions to Melee, mixing up my Smash Brothers.
I think he's been in most Smash Brothers games since Melee, just by virtue of the fact that they keep reusing his audio.
And it's so funny because Chris Seaver has got such a distinctive voice. And it's mostly distinctive because of his role as Conker. And Conker is just the performance of a lifetime, right? And it just sticks in your mind. And so even when he's not doing the Conker voice, you could always pick up on traces of the Conker voice, especially with Slippy. Once you look for little bits of Conker in Slippy's voice, it's just this weird, surreal, disconcerting thing where it's like, why is Conker coming out of Slippy Toad's mouth?
The character I most hear, like, oh, that's Chris Seaver, and that's definitely, like, unmistakably him based on Conker, is, he's not just Peppy and Slippy in this game, but he's also, Chief Lightfoot.
Yeah.
Which, we kind of gone over, like, yeah, there's some baggage with Chief Lightfoot, but, like, just listening to him, like, I can hear, like, oh, that's like the cavemen in Bad Fur Day. That's the like, guys with the slabs. That's just all these, like, raspy voiced characters that are in Bad Fur Day.
I say this with much love and much respect as somebody who cannot do any silly voices. It's endearing to me when, like, Chris Seaver, who is a very talented voice artist, but he's still got a range, I guess, and so you can, like, you're like, oh, that sounds similar to that performance, and it's kind of like the South Park guys a little bit, and it's just like, oh yeah, they've got like 4 voices that they use, but it works, and I'm always happy to hear them, and just very surreal, especially, like I said, coming off a year and a half after Conker's Bad Fur Day, relatively contemporary titles, and yeah.
It's also interesting with Peppy and Slippy specifically, like, I think they are good voices and appropriate for the characters with what they're doing with it, but I think it kind of raises something odd going on with the voice direction in this game, which is, like, again, good voices, fit the characters, not even in the same ballpark as the Star Fox 64 voices.
No, not really. I still buy it, but it's
like, I can buy Slippy a little bit, like, again, like, kind of in the same thing as Fox, where, like, okay, a little bit raspier. Peppy, just an entirely different kind of performance, I think. Like, we've lost the, like, southern twang in favor of a very general idea of, like, what an old man sounds like. Which, again, he's in his late 40s. It's a little bit weird.
Like, a lot of times doing an old man voice, like a really old man voice, like, God darn it! You start dipping into grizzled old prospector, and then you get into southern person, and then it blends. It's just a weird piece, and especially when you're British, there's a lot of through line there between the British accent and the American Southern accent. I mean, it evolved from it, right?
It's kind of impressive how many characters in this game, other than Krystal, do not sound British. Not being able to hide a British accent was not in the job description for anybody in this voice cast.
And it's funny because nowadays, both Rare and Platonic, they just do their natural voices. I mean, they'll still do silly voices, but they never try to hide the essential Britishness of their games. Whereas this is still
that's a marketable feature. It's not like alienating your audience or anything.
But this is like during their whole tenure with Nintendo, I think there really was that kind of idea that no, we need to market it to American children, and they wouldn't like hearing British accents, so we're going to make everything Americanized.
And granted, with Star Fox, it makes sense because that was a pre-existing property where it would be weird for everybody to be British suddenly.
And then it's funny because there wasn't voice acting, like through like full dialogue voice acting in Ghoulies a year later, but you would have like a completely British cast, sans Cooper and Amber, who are American tourists. But I think Ghoulies is where they really started embracing a little bit more. No, we're Rare. We're in the English Midlands.
No, we're like the premier like British developer,
Yeah.
Not in every circle, but definitely mine.
So there were a lot of voice talent offering a character or two in Star Fox Adventures. And many people at Rare not only did double duty, but they did like quadruple duty and then some. They both voiced a lot of ancillary characters, a lot of supporting characters, a lot of just random dinosaurs you would meet here and there. John Silk voiced General Pepper, R.O.B 64, General Scales, and the Warp Stone, which is a wide gulf of characters here.
And, like, not ones that I would have picked up are the same voice. Like, now that I know to pay attention to it, I can kind of tell, but no.
Well, this is what gets confusing, Cameron, because for the longest time, we at DK Vine were under the misconception that Shabunga, the shopkeeper, he has a very distinctive voice. Cameron, would you like to grace us with a bit of Shabunga? You do a pretty good Shabunga.
You pay this much?
Which sounds very close to Mr. Pants. His voice in It's Mr. Pants, which is a little bit higher, a little bit less strained.
Put my pants down. I can't even wear pants.
We thought the vocal talent behind Shabunga was the same as Mr. Pants. Now, John Silk would go on to do Mr. Pants in It's Mr. Pants. However, Shabunga was not John Silk. Shabunga was Stephen Brand. So, they sound very similar, but they are not, in fact, the same voice actors.
Yeah, that's the biggest indicator of John Silk's range to me isn't even in Star Fox Adventures. It's just finding out that he was Mr. Pants.
Yeah, they said on that Rare reveal video for It's Mr. Pants that John Silk got the job basically because he's good at doing voices. And I buy it, considering his range in Star Fox Adventures. And then he would go on to voice Mr. Pants, who sounds just like a cheerier, more friendly Shabunga. So that's not a takeaway from Stephen Brand's performance of Shabunga, which is iconic. And we still quote it and laud it and celebrate it to this day.
The game gives us the Warpstone and Shabunga like one right after the other, and I think it like means that sometimes the Warpstone gets like undersold and just how like memey he is.
Yeah,
but it's also a really fun voice. Like for as many, I think like in almost equal measure, as many times as we've made like
You don't have enough scarabs
jokes, we in equal measure make like nobody brings me gifts anymore jokes.
Mm-hmm. Right. Nobody makes Star Fox Adventures gifts anymore.
Nobody does a bad Warpstone impression anymore.
Yeah, it's not the same without hearing the bagpipes underneath it.
It's again, there's so much of Star Fox Adventures where like, again, like you said, campy. Like if it's a little bit it can be cheesy, but they knew what they were doing and leaned into it.
I think that's what people don't get. Star Fox Adventures is pure camp. It's very knowing. I'm somebody who grew up, like my first exposure to Batman was the Adam West Batman. So I'm primed for this. Like I get what they're doing here. And what they play the serious moments seriously, but they also just lean into how absurd it is and they're having fun with it.
And I feel like that was a pop culture turn that Batman 66 had to like undergo too, where a bunch of like people were writing it off as like the goofy Batman show, and only like decades later vindicated like, no, what are you talking about? The show knew what it was and what it was doing. This was all very calculatedly having fun with it.
Yeah, it's a comic classic. I mean, not just comic book, it's a comedic classic. But yeah, Stephen Brand does a great job with Shabunga. John Silk just kills it, especially. So I'll just point out the Warpstone. It's just such a fun character. And we talked about Rare not being able to fully embrace who they were, but you know, they did make the Warpstone flagrantly Scottish. So they were starting to lean in that direction. Ben Cullum is Falco. For as brief as he appears. I think he does a good Falco.
Yeah. Weirdly, I think it's hard to gauge him in this game because he just does not get a lot of lines. I think where he funnily enough, really shines is in Smash Brothers Melee, because Falco does get a decent amount of dialogue in that game.
Right, when he appears in Fox's comms messages. Yeah, yeah, I don't really have a lot to say about it. But I really like just everything, how Falco is presented in this game. Talking about Star Fox characters who had new voices and whether or not they match up with old voices brings us to Andross.
Yeah, Fox, are you sure you recognize that voice from somewhere? Because I sure as hell didn't.
What a weird... Like, after everything I just said about, no, I can totally buy all of these characters as their Star Fox 64 versions, just aged up a good 8 years or so. Man, Andross is completely different.
It's I want to stress, like, I'm not saying it's a bad voice. It's a very fun voice. Honestly, it's a fun performance. Again, like, very, like, hammy in an enjoyable way. Fits what they're doing with Andross in this game, where he is going around calling himself a god as he's a floating head attached to another floating head. But like the original Andross was basically just like Rick May filtered to sound like Darth Vader. So yeah. I don't know where this came from exactly.
It sounds Scottish to me, like not like the Warp Stone, but it's got this brogue to it that I can't really, I don't know. It's the Duncan Botwood does Andross in this game, and granted, it's my go-to Andross voice. Whenever I'm thinking Andross, this is what my brain pulls out. So it works. It's I wouldn't say it's iconic in my own mind. We'll go with that. It's a choice. It's a bold choice.
I would love to be a fly on the wall with like the voice direction for some of this, but. Yeah. Everybody actually like portraying the characters is like going above and beyond the Call of Duty here.
Yeah, and there are some other actors in the game who we really haven't called out because they're voicing more minor characters or those not part of the core cast. Dean Smith, Louise Tilston, S. Blair, I don't even know their first name, Sean Reed. Chris Sutherland is in the game, as I think Chris Sutherland just does a snow horn or two.
Dean Smith, by the way, TT.
Dean Smith, yeah, and Dean Smith, I think, just does sharp claws.
Yeah, I think he's just like grunt noises is what he's credited with, or like, I don't know if he does the brief speaking parts the sharp claw do. I would assume he does.
Yeah.
Just the like, wake up, somebody coming, kind of like... Mm-hmm. Peter Lorre kind of voice.
Right. And then Louise Jacobs and David McDermott round out the cast. So I love it. I think it's my favorite Rare game as far as voice acting goes, which is good because you have to measure up to Star Fox 64. If you're going to take on a Star Fox sequel of sorts, you're going to have memorable, campy. Yes, campy is the operative word. Voice acting. And it's funny because this was going to be in there even as a Dinosaur Planet game, Sans Star Fox. But they went for it. They brought it with gusto. And to this day, I think it's my favorite. Well, Cameron, I said at the outset of this Spotlight series that at the very end, we would take the calls. So we have a few to take. Eager to hear everyone's thoughts who called in about Star Fox Adventure. So let's go ahead and do that, and we will wrap things up. This won't be the last time we talk about Star Fox Adventures on the Kongversation, but this
you can't stop me.
Yeah, this will be the end of the much-awaited Spotlight series. So let's go ahead and play that first call.
Hey, what's up, DK Vine? It's John Tessier calling in for another episode of The Kongversation. So The Kongversation this week, we're talking about Star Fox Adventures. And what an interesting relationship I have with this game. So my favorite game of all time is Star Fox 64. I love Star Fox. It's my favorite series. So basically to say the sequel to Star Fox 64, that excited the hell out of me when I was like 8 or 9 years old when this came out. It came out 8 days before my birthday. I'm born on October 1st. 8 days before my birthday, the new Star Fox game is coming out, and it's made by Rare, my favorite game developers. I love Star Fox the most, but I also love Banjo-Kazooie and Donkey Kong. So this is the perfect mashup for me, and everyone hates this game. I don't know, it feels to me like Star Fox Adventures has always been specifically made for me, almost tailored for me. Hyle, I know you say that's kind of what Donkey Kong Country is for you. That's what Star Fox Adventures is for me. I also love Ocarina of Time, so it's like everything mashed into one. That's love, and I hate it when people say, oh, Dinosaur Planet would have been better, or a traditional Star Fox game would have been better. No. This is the game we got. This is the game we always needed. I'm all here for it. And just my last comment here, I would have to say, is the Krystal theme. Like, whenever you see Krystal, whenever Fox sees Krystal, and I think it plays at the very end of the game. It's like this saxophone, beautiful music. And to me, it's almost like a goodbye to my childhood. Goodbye to the old school Rare on Nintendo, Rare's last game on a Nintendo home console, the sequel to Star, like, it's just everything about it is like almost the end of my childhood, and I shed a tear whenever I end this game because it means that much to me. All right, can't wait to hear the conversation. Hope you guys do well. See ya.
Thank you for the call, John. Hope you had a happy birthday.
Yeah, birthday.
Yeah, I trust me, I know how it feels to love something that everybody hates. I think we've made a cottage industry out of it here at DK Vine.
Think Star Fox Adventures was my first experience with that, honestly.
I think we definitely chafed a little bit under some of the criticisms that games like Donkey Kong 64 got, because we weren't acquainted with that. We were like, what? Why isn't everybody just going nuts over this? It's the newest Rare game. What are your problems, really? Are you just biased internet critics?
And it was a weird situation. If you're a fan of Star Fox Adventures, you're kind of getting it from both ends, because there were Nintendo fans that resented it for not being Star Fox 64 too.
Yeah.
And Rare fans that resented it for not being Dinosaur Planet. So if you're just coming into this without that context and like, hey, I had a good time with this, I'm going to go online and see what people were saying about it, and they're like burning it in effigy, okay.
Yeah, I think it was, Ghoulies got an even worse reception a year later, and we rallied around that game, and we did the same with Star Fox Adventures. I'm used to it at this point. I mean, hell, when Sea of Thieves came out, it's funny to think about, because Sea of Thieves is such this huge game with such a huge install base. It just fans around the world love that game.
Single-handedly Rare's most successful IP, like probably and arguably at this point.
But we had this problem when Sea of Thieves came out. People didn't like it at first, and it was just because, one, I think we saw the potential in it. I knew what was coming, having seen a little bit of, the roadmap and being under NDA, I couldn't really properly explain, hey, this game is going to have a lot of stuff in it, and it's got a really cool infrastructure now.
No, they had to recruit you specifically to tell everybody how good it was.
But I couldn't adequately do that because I was under too much of an NDA. And then when Greg Mails leaked the TT screenshot, I was like, all right, now I can say why this game is going to be so good. No. Yes, put TT in it. But anyway, yeah, but we've had this problem up through, hell, Tropical Freeze. Let's not even focus on Rare. Tropical Freeze. It got dragged through the mud when it came out, and that had a much quicker turnaround time. It was, I think, a few years later where we had all these critical reassessments. And we're like, hey, was everybody really hard on this game just because it wasn't Metroid? Turns out this might be one of the best 2D platformers ever made? Huh. Funny how that works.
There's a lot of ire, I think, thrown at Star Fox Adventures for not what it is, but what it isn't.
Uh-huh.
And, like, I think the biggest sticking point for me is, like, it's not Star Fox 64 2, but it never said it was. It's Star Fox Adventures. Do you play Diddy Kong Racing and expect Donkey Kong Country 4? No.
It's so funny to me because I think in a lot of people's minds it prohibited there being another Star Fox 64 type game. And just a couple years later, we got Star Fox Assault, so it clearly didn't have any role in that. there wasn't going to be a Star Fox 64 2 coming out near launch on the GameCube.
Even though we did find out, like, a Star Fox project did get folded into Star Fox Adventures, it was also going to be a very different kind of Star Fox game.
Yeah.
Historically, maybe is a little bit of a problem with the Star Fox series, where it will experiment to its detriment sometimes. But, like, back then, there was no reason Star Fox Adventures should have had those expectations on it when it was, I think, clearly marking itself as a different thing.
Just wrapping it up, because I'm sure we'll have more to say on this in our final thoughts. But, John, I like that we can embrace what we love here in this community and not really let the broader popular consensus really bog us down. We can be like, no, we're going to see the good in this. We're going to acknowledge whatever flaws it has, but we're not going to really get hung up on, oh, critics hate this, or, oh, the popular kids don't like it. We've been defending Grab by the Ghoulies for 19 years. At this point, I've got some gray hairs in my head now, and I'm still at this, and I still have no problem just loving this for what it is. And honestly, I take it as a badge of honor. Like, I don't want to be a contrarian, but like when you see, especially the video game critical consensus industry, when you see how that operates and how much of a hive mind it is, you just kind of start rolling your eyes like Fox, and you're like, you know what, I'm just going to like what I like and not really worry about what IGN has to say about it. So
I also do agree with this call that, like, the Krystal theme does kind of have this, like, layer, as like out and out goofy a song as it deliberately is, it does have this, like, very wistful quality to me, because it's the very last original song you hear in a Rare game on a Nintendo home console.
That's right. Yeah, I like how you said original, because of course we would kind of get new arrangements in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate of Banjo-Kazooie, and but yeah, you're right. It's
well, I mean, original in the sense that it's the last song in the game that isn't the title screen popping up immediately after. Okay. But like, there's a lot of asterisks to that have, like, kind of been eroded by the passage of time, because, I mean, you can get Banjo-Kazooie music on demand on your Switch now.
Right.
But at the time, it felt like this is a goodbye.
And it was.
But, like, a very, like, respectful, good, like, everybody's shaking hands and waving as they go away.
Yeah, drenched with a little bit of undercurrent of horniness at the same time.
Very, very rare.
Yeah,
very
I wouldn't want to rare to say goodbye in any other fashion. All right, let's go ahead and take our next call.
Hey guys, Rick here. Well, the Star Fox series is something really special and important to me. I was 5 when I got my first Nintendo 64 and the game with it, and I was just instantly charmed with Star Fox 64 and the character of Fox McCloud. Just one of my favorites since that age. I was still fairly young, so I didn't even know about Dinosaur Planet until I'd gotten older, but I remember seeing Star Fox Adventures in I believe it was a GameStop mall kiosk. I was with my grandfather, and he thought it looked silly, but, he was an old man. I don't think he really cared for blue foxes, but, I thought it looked awesome. And, just the idea of getting to play as Fox outside of the R-Wing. It's absolutely awesome. And I really am favorable towards the game. I'm sure y'all have already mentioned it, but it's absolutely beautiful. It's got a lot of memorable moments. One that comes to mind is when you get into Krazoa spirits, one of the trials is just like this. You're trying to keep the meter at the top. It's like a sanity bar, and they're like, all these dinosaurs and things are trying to get Fox off his game, and you just gotta keep him steady, keep him strong. It's super cool. Last thing I'd say is, I think the series really needs to embrace the character of Krystal, just because, I think she's a great character, and I do like her, but, like, the series needs all the help it can get, and I don't think, say with Zero, where it seems like they're trying to ignore her. I think, considering how many people know of the character outside of who've probably never even played the games, I think that'd be a wise decision. And I really hope we don't have to wait the same amount of time we did between Command and Zero to get a new game, but hopefully it'll come back. And yeah, and maybe take some inspiration from Adventures and Assault and all those amazing games. All right, y'all. Take it easy.
Thank you for the call, Rick. I think it's almost been about the same amount of time between Command and Zero as Zero and now. It's been, almost 7 years since Star Fox Zero?
Gosh, I have such a little comprehension of the passage of time anymore.
I mean, same. I think we're all in that flying galleon, but yeah, you're absolutely right, Rick. They need to embrace Krystal. I think it's kind of stupid and backwards thinking that Star Fox Zero just not even talking about placement in the timeline or whether or not it was a reboot or reconceptualization of the first game and then Star Fox 64, but you're really gonna take the team backwards and have it be all dudes again? Like, what? Like, Krystal worked on the team. She brought something different, and it wasn't like we lost out on Peppy. Peppy was still there. They found a new use for him, but he was still ever present, same amount of time. I think it's weird that we're just gonna sideline Krystal. I don't think there's a danger that we will ever lose her 100%. I think they understand that she is pretty much as iconic as the original team. She's kind of got that staying power for various reasons, but I don't know if, I have no idea. I mean, Cameron and I talked about it years ago, but I have no idea what another Star Fox game would look like at this point.
Partly because Zero is so non-committal as to what it is exactly.
Yeah.
It walks like a reboot, talks like a reboot, and resets everything to the Star Fox 64 status quo like a reboot, but it doesn't really come out and say yeah, this is from square one. The thing that will define it as a reboot is making things set after it that contradict Adventures, and even Starlink doesn't do that. It's just Starlink it's a very fun play around in the Star Fox toy box, but it is very clearly I think Ubisoft treading carefully, similar to how Team Dakota was with Conquer in Project Spark, where they're acknowledging another Star Fox game could come after this, and we don't want to rock the boat in case it does.
Right, because if you do, then your own project is going to be invalidated or erased, and you want to keep your own contribution as vital and evergreen as possible. Yeah, but I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful. I'm more hopeful now about the future of Star Fox in relation to the 3 games we consider the Dinosaur Planet trilogy than I was back in 2015. I think a lot has changed. I think there's more nostalgia for this era now. And I think Star Fox Zero kind of shit the bed in some respects as far as, again, critical consensus. Not so, its own merits we could debate aside, but it wasn't universally embraced. And so the thing that everybody thought they wanted, which was just to go back to Star Fox 64, might not have been what everybody wanted. And I think having Krystal as an assist trophy in Ultimate, and I mean, granted, there's some linkage there between Star Fox Assault and the Smash team after the fact, but
even Zero itself, they did that animated short where they name drop Saria. It's still people are thinking about the legacy of Adventures, whether or not we're seeing it, and I hope whatever direction they take the franchise in the future, as much as I don't want a continuity reboot, the boon of doing a continuity reboot is you can take stuff you introduced very late and bring it in much earlier. So, or stuff you cut out entirely. So, like, yeah, if you do pull the ripcord on that, bring in Krystal, bring in Mew and Faye from Star Fox 2, bring in Panther from Assault. Like, you can seed all that stuff early.
Yeah, but like you always say, Cameron, I think the people who are afraid of Star Fox Command's multiple endings are just cowards. I think you could just easily have a new Star Fox game, set it after everything, and just go from there. Just have everything at your disposal.
You absolutely could, and not even in a way that rocks the boat too much. There are endings in that game that are very much like end the adventure continues style ways to continue. At the very least, one of them is. And yeah, I don't think it's the albatross around the series neck that people treat it as. I've seen so many stories like pull out of more like tangled webs. It's fine.
Yeah, it is. And yeah, before we take our last call, I just want to say it's really cool to hear John and Rick say like Star Fox is their biggest series. Like that, they're bigger fans of Star Fox than anything else, because so much here at DK Vine and on the Kongversation, we associate Star Fox Adventures with Rare fandom first and foremost. Oh, you probably like this game if you're a hardcore fan of Rare. And it's cool that these Star Fox fans embrace Star Fox Adventures for what it was, and that's really good to hear.
It's what got me into it. I wanted to follow the Star Fox 64 characters and what they got into next, and I really liked the direction it took them.
I think there's more of a shared bond between just out-and-out Star Fox fandom and Rare fandom that was always there from the start. This project makes complete sense that it happened, and despite all of our gnashing of the teeth when it did, when the transition took place, I think it was for the best. I honestly do. All right, let's take our last call.
Hi, love your show. I unfortunately missed out mostly on Star Fox Adventures when it was on the GameCube. I only played it for maybe 5 or 10 minutes. And since I no longer have a GameCube or a Wii, I was kind of wondering, what do you think is the likelihood of the game ever getting a re-release? I'm guessing it's probably stuck in licensing hell at the moment because of the mix of Rare characters and Nintendo characters. But given that Rare was able to make Banjo-Kazooie get a re-release on Switch, and we're even getting a GoldenEye re-release pretty soon, I was wondering what you think the likelihood is of Star Fox Adventures getting that same treatment. Or do you think the work that a lot of fans are doing on the Dinosaur Planet ROM that leaked last year will possibly fit that bill in its own weird way as the closest thing we'll ever get to a Star Fox Adventures re-release? Thank you very much, and have a great day.
Thank you for the call. I believe first-time caller. To answer your questions to the best of my ability, because I'm not a lawyer when it comes to Nintendo Rare law, but I do know that Nintendo does own all the characters in Star Fox Adventures. It was how the buyout shook out, infamously, it was a lot more complicated once upon a time, but when it became Star Fox Adventures, Rare was making the game to be published by Nintendo, and everything was a Nintendo trademark, and when they had to basically settle everything in the divorce, it was decided that Nintendo would get everything created for Donkey Kong and Star Fox. And so, at least on an IP level, Nintendo has everything, and any other arrangements that have to be worked out with Rare haven't worked out in the past as far as other games go.
Genuinely, I think the answer is that a re-release of Star Fox Adventures is exactly as likely as the possibility of Nintendo making their GameCube library in general available in any form again.
Yeah.
That, I think, is the big sticking point, really.
At this point, I don't think there's any hindrance as far as Rare being owned by Microsoft. I think they're very clearly, both parties are shown to want to work together very eagerly. And the fact that we're seeing that so much since 2019, like explicitly, but just out in the open now, especially with Banjo-Kazooie and now GoldenEye coming to the Switch. I think that the second we would see the GameCube library being opened up, Star Fox Adventures would absolutely be on the table. Maybe even one of the first games.
Yeah, like in the grand scheme of like IP rights breakouts, Star Fox Adventures is way closer to a Donkey Kong Country 1 than it is to a Banjo-Kazooie. It's a very clean-cut case. I think honestly the biggest hiccup is just that it has the Rareware logo in it.
Right.
And that's really it.
But, you know, and anything besides that, yeah, it's not a problem. Like you said, it's very clean cut. It's not Diddy Kong Racing, which most people still don't understand to this day.
It's not even Donkey Kong Country 2 with all its Killer Instinct references. There's nothing like that in Adventures, which honestly, like, both because of the tone of the game, but also like might be by design because the writing was on the wall that they were going to lose all this well into development.
Yeah, they lost Tricky and they were like, no more. Like, don't get any ideas about putting in any beloved characters in this game because we'll lose them and we'll never be able to use them on Xbox. Yeah, I would say really the ball's in Nintendo's court. That's it. It just when are we going to get GameCube games available in any real way?
Like, yeah, the second if they in the event they ever do like a Nintendo Switch Online GameCube collection, like, I have no doubt Adventures would be part of it. It's just a matter of if such a thing will even ever be done.
I don't want to be too optimistic, but if that ever came to pass, I would say within the first year. That's how good I feel. Because also it's the only Rare game in the library, so it's not like this awful feeling with the N64 library where it's like, okay, well, we got the second one announced and it's GoldenEye, but when are the others coming? Will we get others?
And it's a Star Fox game, like, controversial or not, like, if you're a Nintendo IP and there's, like, no legal thing or, like, hardware implementation thing holding it up, like, you're on the service. Like,
yeah.
Nobody's hemming and hawing, like, over, like, Kirby's Dream Course ending up on the Super Nintendo Online just because it's not like Superstar.
I think once we do see that, when it happens, because Star Fox Adventures, it hasn't been in quite the same sense of legal limbo as Diddy Kong Racing has been, but, you know, outside of its release for the GameCube and its re-release as a player's choice game on the GameCube, it hasn't really been commercially available since the GameCube breathed its last breath. And I think because of that, it only really has that initial ugly reception and the backlash. It really only has that to inform subsequent generations of it. I mentioned a hive mind. And it's amusing because ultimately a hive mind was the nemesis of Star Fox Assault. And I like to think that there's some commentary there. And it wasn't, but I like to think there was some commentary there about how Adventures was treated. You know, I don't want to say that the internet just decided to hate on Star Fox Adventures and then, you know, had that ill-informed opinion become their reality. But as we went over on part one, and as you alluded to earlier in this episode, there were so many factors working against this game and the way people perceived it and received it. The fact, like, it wasn't Star Fox 64 2, the fact that the buyout was happening, the fact that, you know, Nintendo purists could also compare it to Zelda. It just had so much working against it. And look, the truth is it doesn't hold up to Ocarina of Time or Majora's Mask. I love Star Fox Adventures, and I will admit that much. But, and just like we were just talking with our friend Mitchell Wolf the other day about how games are, I guess, reviewed, and when you put games on a best of list, how many people will put Tetris as the best game of all time on the list. But when you're ranking people's personal favorites, who's going to put Tetris as their favorite game? And I think that's very applicable to this discussion about Star Fox Adventures because, like mechanically, would I put Star Fox Adventures as the most in the league of the most brilliant games of all time? No, I wouldn't. If I'm being intellectually cool about it, I wouldn't. But emotionally, it's in my top 10 favorite games of all time, Cameron.
Yeah, like would I seriously like argue with anybody that it's better than any given Zelda game? Probably not. Does it mean a hell of a lot more to me than any given Zelda game? Yes. As a person, it does.
If you'll indulge me, Cameron, I just want to read my top 10 list as it currently stands, because when I just say it's my top 10 list, it doesn't really mean much without seeing what other games I rank it next to. And of course, I am the host of the Kongversation. I'm the co-founder of DK Vine. So you can kind of guess where my list is going. Number 1 is Donkey Kong Country 2, obviously. Number 2 is Sea of Thieves. Number 3 is Banjo-Kazooie. Number 4 is Grab by the Ghoulies. Fuck all of you. Number 5 is Diddy Kong Racing. Number 6 is a tie between Tropical Freeze and Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair. I can't decide. I like them both pretty equally at this point. Number 8 is Donkey Kong Country 3. Again, fuck everyone. Number 9 is Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. See, I am not biased towards Rare. I like games that aren't made by Rare, especially games that bring back King K. Rool and also work with Rare to incorporate Banjo-Kazooie.
I'm sorry, what were 3 through 9, Hyle? I was still writing my angry comment about you putting Sea of Thieves at number 2.
And number 10 is Star Fox Adventures. And I don't know if it will ever leave that list for me. Because I was like, what would knock off Star Fox Adventures from my top 10 list? And I don't know, because emotionally, it means so much more to me than something like Tetris. It's the first major Donkey Kong Universe game that I played when I was legally a full adult. Except, the part about buying alcohol and renting a car.
Do not do those in that order, by the way.
Yeah, we should really swap those, you would think. Anyway, so Star Fox Adventures for me represents a weird, warm bit of nostalgia in my own life for a time I'm not even particularly nostalgic for, where I was a new adult and I had all of the freedoms that came with adulthood, like, oh, I can just cut class. Oh, I can just go here and it's fine. I can buy pornography, but why would I? It's free on the internet. I was a savvy 18-year-old.
No, and it's a bold new world on the internet thanks to this Star Fox game that just came out.
Yeah. What am I going to do on the internet? See people complain about Star Fox? No, I'm going to look at porn. No, but the melancholy that came with that very notable turning point in my life, married with the Rare buyout, it really was the passing of my childhood. I know John was talking about it, but John was also like 8 years old, he said. This really was like the death of my childhood years, but I still think of Star Fox Adventures not as really a sad experience. I celebrate it for what it was. It's interesting to me. I think this is the first time I really became okay with change. Star Fox Adventures helped me make this transition.
No, I mean, I think it is, again, like the buyout like casts such a weird mood over this entire game that's kind of like inseparable from it, but I feel like it's got the feeling of like you have a friend that's moving out of the country. You don't know when you're ever going to see them again. Like, you're going to lose touch, but you're just going to have, like, one last, like, big party over the weekend with them.
Right.
To send them off on their way with the good vibes and, like, good memories. And that, I think, is kind of, like, the place in my mind that, like, Star Fox Adventures cemented itself.
Yeah, you'll worry about the feelings of sadness on Monday, but you're gonna have a good time while you can with it. And, the Rare fandom of that era has, I think, sort of asserted itself now more as we've come of age, and I think our opinions now are held as equally true and valid alongside the angst that Generation X threw at us at the turn of the millennium. And, you still run into a lot of people who parrot the anti-Star Fox Adventures talking points. And I get that the game's never going to be for everyone, nor should it be. But I think, like we just said, a large part of that, too, is the people who parrot those opinions are people who probably haven't played it. They haven't had a chance to play it. We talk about Diddy Kong Racing being this lost game, but at least it had Diddy Kong Racing DS in the middle of the break there. Star Fox Adventures really hasn't had any legal means to play it. I think more people have probably played the Dinosaur Planet ROM in recent years than they've played Star Fox Adventures. And that's a shame. It needs to be accessible, and people need to form new opinions of it, unmarred by the political maneuverings of 2002.
Yeah, I think once the Wii U shop goes down, like the entire quote unquote Dinosaur Planet trilogy that DK Vines latched onto isn't going to be playable on any modern hardware.
It's like the tagline we have when the rotating tagline we have when you visit our site. One of them is where the Star Fox franchise is 3 games called the Dinosaur Planet trilogy, which I want it to be more than a trilogy. I want to continue this legacy, but that's just a funny little, that sums up how weird we are. But yeah, I think all the melancholy around this game, the buyout, really, I can't separate it with just the fact that Rare's legacy was under attack during the same time. And I was looking at my own adulthood and the passing of my childhood and thinking, wow, everything I loved in my childhood, especially the thing I loved the most, Rare's games, the DKU, it's all under attack now. It's all being thrown into question. What is life going to be like now? And ultimately, this matters very little. This is pop culture arguments. This doesn't really matter as far as the world goes. There are far bigger problems now and even back in 2002 than worrying about how people perceive Rare and Star Fox Adventures. But I don't know, I think also there's that sadness too of seeing how beautiful Star Fox Adventures was, how much it resonated with me when I could get past popular opinions about Star Fox Adventures being unpopular, and I could really just vibe with it, and it resonated with me, and I was thinking, I would love to see a sequel to this by Rare, and I'm never going to get that chance. And I loved stacking up Rare's last major release for a Nintendo console against the first major release of any studio on that console. So, for example, taking Donkey Kong Country 3 and comparing it to Super Mario World. And that's not me saying that Donkey Kong Country 3 is necessarily better than Super Mario World, because I love Super Mario World. I respect the hell out of it. So much of Super Mario World's DNA is in Donkey Kong Country and Yooka-Laylee and Impossible Lair. But it's just fun comparing the two of them visually at the very least, because you would never think they would be on the same console. If you were to take Donkey Kong Country 3, take it back in time to the launch and say, oh yeah, this is also a Super Nintendo game, people would not believe it. And taking, for example, Super Mario 64 and comparing it to Conker's Bad Fur Day, it's sort of unbelievable that they share the same hardware. And yeah, I wanted to do that with Star Fox Adventures, or I wanted to do that, I guess I should say, with another Rare game, around 2005, and compare that to, I don't know, Luigi's Mansion or something. We didn't get that chance, but Star Fox Adventures held its own up through the end of the GameCube, and I would say well into the Wii and Wii U. It's still one of the most gorgeous games on a Nintendo platform, I would say up to the Switch. It really held its own and punched above its weight for years to come.
For sure. Just on GameCube alone, I think it's my favorite looking GameCube game, except for maybe Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door, but that's going for a completely different art direction.
Yeah, I think just as a game that looks pretty and it's supposed to invoke quasi-realism, not even getting into artistic design, stylistic touches.
Which again, quickest visual design to age and age poorly is going for any sort of realism.
But Star Fox Adventures works because it just blends in enough cartoony surrealness with that realism. Same reason Donkey Kong games can hold up. Same reason, honestly, Sea of Thieves is going to persevere visually.
It's like a Jurassic Park 1 dinosaur.
Yes, exactly. And I don't know. I guess, we've talked about this game for multiple hours. We talked about Dinosaur Planet last season for even longer. I think, ultimately, after really gelling with Star Fox 64 to the extent I did, at the time I did when I was already fully meshed with Rare, I think Star Fox Adventures just really made me adore Star Fox, and it brought it up almost to the same tier as Donkey Kong, Banjo-Kazooie, and Conker for me. And so for that, at the end of the day, I'm thankful that it exists. I'm honestly happy Dinosaur Planet did become Star Fox Adventures. Gun to my head, I think I am. Because, staff to the head, you can't bring blasters here. Because, yeah, it brought Star Fox into the DKU. However limited of an engagement it turned out to be, it took something I loved, made it into something I adore. So all in all, a happy ending.
This has been a File 2 production.
Que rico.